Hey there, tonight we're diving into the gritty world of gladiators in ancient Rome, where survival wasn't just about dodging lions, but sometimes involved strategic naps instead of swordplay. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're jolted awake by the raucous sound of clanging metal and the guttural commands of your Lannister. It's another bright morning in ancient Rome, and you, my friend, are a gladiator. Welcome to your life, a mix of glory, grit, and the ever-present possibility of gruesome demise. Oh, and if you're expecting a hearty Roman breakfast, adjust your expectations. Your morning feast, barley and beans seasoned with the taste of survival. Let's dive into your digs, the ludus, or gladiator school. Forget any visions of gilded halls or cushy dorms. We're talking cramped quarters, shared with other burly warriors who probably snore louder than a Roman chariot race. Your day kicks off with basic training, and by basic, I mean swinging a wooden sword until your arms feel like they're going to fall off. Welcome to the gym, Roman style. Now, about that delightful diet. You might think gladiators feasted on fattened calves and drank goblets of wine. Sorry to burst your bubble. Your main course is a humble serving of barley porridge, spiced occasionally with beans. Packed with carbs to fuel your muscles, sure, but a Michelin star meal it is not. This gladiator diet, as researchers like to call it, was less about gourmet delight and more about keeping you fighting fit. Not quite the steak and eggs you might wish for, but hey, it does the job. As you scarf down your morning gruel, let's chat about the economics of this bloody spectacle. You're a pawn in a game of life and death, and to your owner, you're an investment. The average cost of equipping a gladiator like you, about 3,000 denarii. That's roughly the equivalent of a new car today, except you're the car, and your crash test involves actual swords. The upkeep isn't cheap either. Your armor, weapons, and training all come with a price tag. But why are you worth it? Because as long as you're alive and kicking, you're a potential gold mine. Your victories bolster the reputation and wallet of your owner. But let's get to the heart of the matter, your actual value. In a world where human life could be quantified by livestock, you're worth about as much as a pig's weight in silver. Specifically, a good pig might go for around 200 denarii, give or take. So, think of yourself as a very expensive, slightly more dangerous oinker. The myth of the fearless gladiator is compelling, but the reality, less glamorous. You're not just fighting for glory, you're fighting to survive another day. The training is brutal, designed to hone your skills and build your resilience. You're learning to anticipate moves, dodge death, and maybe, just maybe, earn that laurel crown. Ah, but it's not all doom and gloom. There's camaraderie here, a brotherhood forged in the fires of combat. You and your fellow gladiators share more than just cramped quarters. There's a respect, a bond that comes from knowing you all face the same merciless fate in the arena. And while the world may see you as disposable entertainment, you know there's more to this life than meets the eye. So, as you prepare for another grueling session under the watchful eye of your Lannister, remember this. You're part of a legacy, a tradition that will be remembered long after the dust of the arena has settled. Despite the odds, you rise each morning, fueled by barley, beans, and the unyielding will to survive. Now, as you step out into the daylight, the sun climbing higher over the bustling city of Rome, let's navigate the social hierarchy of the arena. Spoiler alert, it's a bit more complicated than just big guy hits other big guy with a sword. Being a gladiator could be akin to being a celebrity, but think less red carpet and more blood-stained sand. In the Roman Empire, fame wasn't just a perk, it was a survival strategy. The more renowned you were, the more the crowd loved you, and the more likely you were to walk away with your head still attached to your shoulders. Think of it like the ancient equivalent of Instagram followers, except instead of selfies, you had to deliver a killer performance, literally. And fame had its perks. Successful gladiators could score sponsorship deals, believe it or not. Some gladiators became so popular that they endorsed products. Yes, that's right. Ancient Rome had its own version of celebrity endorsements. Imagine being the face of an olive oil brand or a line of sandals. Because nothing says luxury like a guy who survives by dodging death on a regular basis. Your social standing as a gladiator was a complex game of perception. A successful fighter could amass a small fortune, earning upwards of 100,000 sesterces in prize money over a career if they were lucky. To put that into perspective, a Roman soldier might earn about 900 sesterces a year. So, if you played your cards right, you could retire with a nice little nest egg, or at least enough to buy a villa and a few slaves to do your bidding. But the road to glory was paved with political landmines. Emperors like Commodus were notorious for using gladiatorial games to bolster their own popularity. Commodus, who ruled from 180 to 192 AD, was a piece of work. He fancied himself quite the gladiator and often participated in the games himself. Now, don't get it twisted. He wasn't risking life and limb. His opponents were usually armed with wooden swords, making sure his imperial ego wasn't the only thing that was inflated. Commodus's antics were a spectacle, but they served a purpose. The games were a way to keep the populace entertained and distracted, a classic case of bread and circuses. The emperor used them as a tool for political manipulation, ensuring the masses were too busy cheering to notice the cracks in the empire's foundation. And let's not forget the crowd's role in all of this. The audience was a critical part of the gladiatorial spectacle. Their cheers or jeers could seal a gladiator's fate. If you were a crowd favorite, you might just get the thumbs up, literally, to live another day. But if the crowd turned against you, well, let's just say your career would be short-lived. The myth of the gladiator as a fearless warrior is appealing, but the reality was more of a high-stakes game of survival, with social and political dynamics playing out on the sands of the arena. Gladiators were pawns in a larger game, used by emperors to curry favor and distract the masses. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a certain allure to the life of a gladiator. For some, it was a chance to rise above their station, to achieve a level of fame and fortune that was otherwise unattainable. So, as you stand there, the roar of the crowd reverberating through the arena, remember this: you're not just a fighter. You're a player in one of history's most elaborate and deadly games. Fame, fortune, and the whims of an emperor could mean the difference between life and death. In this world, every move counted, every battle was a performance, and every day was a chance to become a legend or a cautionary tale. Stay tuned, because the story of the gladiators is far from over, and there's plenty more blood, sweat, and politics to uncover. And just like that, as the sun reaches its zenith, the Colosseum transforms into a roaring amphitheater of chaos. The midday spectacle is underway, and you, dear gladiator, are about to dive headfirst into the swirling vortex of myth and reality that is the Roman arena. So was it really all death, glory, and a one-way ticket to the underworld? Not exactly. Let's unravel this tapestry of tales, shall we? First, the myth that every gladiator fight was a bloody battle to the death. Not quite. While the sands of the arena saw plenty of crimson, the idea that every match ended with a lifeless body is more Hollywood than historical. You see, a gladiator represented a hefty investment, 3,000 denarii, remember. And the Romans, ever the shrewd businessmen, didn't throw money away for mere spectacle. Instead, many of these fights were more akin to WWE wrestling matches than a Game of Thrones showdown. The goal: to entertain, not to decimate, into the practice of using wooden swords or the rudis. This trusty training tool was like the safety net of the gladiatorial world. It allowed gladiators to hone their skills without accidentally turning their sparring partner into a human kebab. Think of it as ancient Rome's take on a practice jersey, essential for preparation, but not part of the main event. Now, don't get me wrong. Gladiatorial combat was no walk in the park. Injuries were common, and yes, fatalities did occur. But here's the kicker. Actual death rates were surprisingly low. Some estimates suggest that only 1 in 9 fights ended in death. That's about 11%, a far cry from the 100% death rate we often imagine. So why the myth of constant carnage? Because the Romans, much like us, loved a good story, and nothing sells tickets like the promise of danger and death-defying heroics. And what about those who did survive the arena? Well, surviving gladiators weren't just tossed aside like yesterday's toga. If you managed to dodge the sharp end of a sword long enough, there were some sweet perks on the horizon. Retirement plans, for example, were a real thing. After a certain number of successful battles, a gladiator might be granted a rudis as a symbol of freedom. Imagine that, a wooden sword granting you liberty, a reversal of its training role. This was your golden ticket to a life beyond the blood and sand, a symbol of having earned your stripes in the toughest school known to mankind. Moreover, some gladiators were given pensions. Yes, pensions. These might not have been the 401k plans we know today, but they offered financial security that could ease a former fighter into a more peaceful life. With a bit of luck and a lot of skill, a gladiator could retire, perhaps run a tavern, or even become a trainer at a ludus, passing down their hard-earned knowledge to the next generation of would-be warriors. And let's not forget the ultimate prize, freedom. While not guaranteed, gladiators who captured the hearts of the crowd and the favor of their masters could earn this rare accolade. It was the ancient equivalent of winning the lottery, except you'd spent your career dodging spears and swords instead of picking numbers. In the end, the life of a gladiator was a high-stakes gamble. Every day in the arena was a roll of the dice, a chance to either meet a brutal end or attain a level of fame and freedom unimaginable to most. So, as the midday sun blazes down and the crowds roar crescendos, remember that each strike, parry, and feint is more than just a fight. It's a step on the tightrope between life, death, and the tantalizing possibility of freedom. And there you have it, the gritty reality behind the legends. These warriors weren't just bloodthirsty brutes. They were skilled athletes, savvy entertainers, and sometimes lucky enough to be survivors. This is where the myth and the man meet, in the crucible of the Colosseum, where every clash is a story waiting to be told. And the tale of the gladiator is far from over. There's more blood, sweat, and unexpected twists yet to come. So stay tuned as we continue to peel back the layers of one of history's most compelling spectacles. But hold your horses, or in this case your chariots, because before we dive helmet first into the arena, let's press pause and consider what makes this spectacle tick. It's not just about big guys with bigger swords. Nope, the gladiatorial games were the Super Bowl halftime show of the ancient world, with a budget that would make even the most extravagant of today's music festivals look like a backyard barbecue. First up, we have the editors. No, not the kind who fix your grammar mistakes. In this arena, editors were the sponsors, the sugar daddies of the gladiatorial games. These were the politicians or wealthy citizens. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of Silicon Valley tech moguls, who bankrolled the whole shebang. Why, you ask? Because nothing said I'm a big deal like throwing a party for Rome that featured more carnage than a season of Game of Thrones. And what did these editors get in return? Power, influence, and a place on the political podium. By funding these grand spectacles, they played the crowd like a finely tuned lyre, currying favor with the masses and implicitly promising, vote for me, and I'll keep the blood flowing, or rather, the games going. Now, let's talk about the Lannister, the managers, the backstage wizards who made sure everything ran smoother than a Roman aqueduct. These guys were the ultimate talent scouts, responsible for training gladiators and ensuring they didn't, die too soon. A Lannister's reputation was built on the success of his fighters, so they had a vested interest in keeping their gladiators alive, well-trained, and ready to deliver a good show. But what about the cost of staging one of these epic throwdowns? Well, buckle up, because we're about to talk numbers that would make a Roman accountant weep. Staging a typical game could run into the thousands of denarii. And if you wanted to go all out with exotic animals, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, or elaborate set pieces, you were looking at a budget that would rival a small military campaign. For perspective, a single African elephant could cost up to 4,000 denarii, more than the price of a well-equipped gladiator. That's like splurging on a luxury sports car just to park it in your driveway for the neighbors to gawk at. And oh, those elaborate set pieces. Sometimes the arena floor would be flooded to stage mark naval battles, complete with miniature warships. The logistics of this, mind-boggling. Imagine the planning meeting. All right, guys, we need to flood the Colosseum by Thursday. Any thoughts? This was Roman engineering at its finest and most absurd. But let's not forget the real magic trick here. All this spectacle served a purpose beyond mere entertainment. It was a massive smoke and mirrors act, a way to distract the populace from Rome's less than glamorous realities. Remember, while the crowds were busy being wowed by a rhino taking on a gladiator, at a mere 15, 000 denarii a pop for the rhino. The powers that be could gloss over the fact that the city's infrastructure was crumbling faster than a stale loaf of bread. And speaking of bread, here's a tasty tidbit. Many games were accompanied by a literal distribution of bread to the spectators. Free carbs and death matches. Now that's a combo meal. This was the essence of bread and circuses, a political strategy as old as Rome itself. The idea was simple. Keep the masses fed and entertained, and they'd be too distracted to notice political corruption, economic troubles, or the fact that their beloved empire was starting to fray at the edges. But why did the Romans go to such lengths to put on these spectacles? It's tempting to say they were just bloodthirsty, but that's only scratching the surface. The games were a way for Romans to assert their cultural identity and superiority. The might of Rome was on display in every fight, every beast brought to heel, every spectacle that defied the ordinary. And for the average Roman, attending these games wasn't just a pastime. It was an affirmation that they were part of the greatest empire on earth. It was a communal experience, a ritual that connected them to their ancestors and to the very essence of Roman eaters. So, as the afternoon sun blazes down on the Colosseum, casting long shadows across the sand, it's not just the gladiators who are putting on a show. It's Rome itself, city of contradictions, where power and spectacle collide in a dance as perilous as any fought with sword and shield. Stay tuned, because the saga of the gladiators, with its blend of myth, reality, and political theater, is far from over. We've only just begun to peel back the layers of this ancient spectacle, and there's plenty more to uncover. As the sun begins to set over the eternal city, casting its golden glow against the ancient stones of the Colosseum, the day in the life of a gladiator starts to wind down. But don't think for a second that the drama is over. Oh no, my friend, this is where the real intrigue begins, the twilight of a gladiator's career. Whether they found themselves basking in the glory of retirement, meeting their end in the arena, or grasping at the elusive prize of freedom, each gladiator's story had its own dramatic conclusion. Let's kick things off with the idea of retirement. You might be picturing a gladiator lounging in a villa somewhere, sipping on Falernian wine and reminiscing about the good old days. But hold your horses, it's not quite that glamorous. If a gladiator survived long enough, they might be granted their freedom, symbolized by a wooden sword, the rudis. This was a big deal, akin to getting a golden parachute after a grueling corporate career, except here, your office involved dodging death. Now, retirement wasn't just about dodging spears and swords. Some gladiators did manage to carve out a comfortable life post-arena. Take Spiculus, for example, a famed gladiator who was so beloved by the Emperor Nero that he was awarded land and wealth. Talk about a retirement package. But for every Spiculus, there were countless others who faded into obscurity, returning to humbler origins, or, if lucky, finding work as trainers in the ludus. It was a mixed bag, par for the course when your career involved life or death on a daily basis. For those who weren't lucky enough to retire, the end game was often death. And no, it wasn't always the dramatic, crowd-pleasing spectacle you might imagine. Sure, some gladiators went out in a blaze of glory, cheered on by adoring fans. But more often than not, death was a quieter, more ignominious affair. Injuries, infections, and plain old bad luck were just as likely to claim a gladiator's life as a rival's sword. Despite the grim realities, the allure of freedom remained a powerful motivator. The prospect of earning a rudis was enough to keep many gladiators fighting, even as their bodies screamed for rest. Freedom was the ultimate prize, a chance to leave behind the blood and sand, to start anew. And while not every gladiator achieved it, the dream was tantalizing enough to keep hope alive. Now let's shift gears and talk about the public perception of gladiators. Here's a fun fact for your next trivia night. By the 5th century, gladiatorial games were on the decline. Why? Well, a mix of reasons. For starters, the Roman Empire was going through some, let's call them, financial difficulties. Funding extravagant games became less feasible as the coffers ran dry and the empire's borders crumbled. Turns out, maintaining a sprawling empire is a bit like trying to keep a leaky boat afloat, expensive and exhausting. But economics wasn't the only factor. As Christianity spread throughout the empire, the moral compass started to shift. Gladiatorial games, once seen as the pinnacle of Roman entertainment, began to be viewed as barbaric. The new faith's emphasis on compassion and the sanctity of life didn't exactly gel with the whole, watch people fight to the death concept. Theodosius I, a Christian emperor, even issued a decree in 393 AD effectively banning the games. By 404 AD, the last known gladiatorial battle took place, quietly closing a chapter on a centuries-old tradition. So why do we still romanticize these ancient warriors today? Why do we, centuries later, find ourselves captivated by their stories, even as we sit comfortably on our couches with a bag of popcorn? It's simple. The gladiator is the ultimate underdog. Their stories are ones of resilience, grit, and raw human spirit. They rose from the lowest rungs of society to become the rock stars of the ancient world, all while facing death with every performance. It's no wonder Hollywood and pop culture can't get enough of them. And let's not forget the allure of the arena itself. The Colosseum stands as a testament to Roman engineering prowess, a monument that has captured imaginations for generations. It's a symbol of power, decadence, and the eternal human fascination with spectacle. Even now, as tourists flock to its ancient ruins, the Colosseum serves as a reminder of the heights and depths of human ambition. In the end, the gladiators' legacy is one of paradoxes. They were both revered and reviled, entertainers and slaves, heroes and victims. Their stories remind us of the complexities of human nature, the allure of fame and fortune, and the lengths people will go to in pursuit of glory. As we reflect on their lives, we're reminded that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about the people who lived it, in all their messy, contradictory glory. So there you have it, the tale of the gladiator, a saga of blood, sweat, and survival that continues to captivate us. Whether they retired in peace, met a grim end, or won their freedom, each gladiator's story was a testament to the human spirit. And as we close the book on this chapter of history, remember, the real legacy of the gladiators isn't just in their battles, but in their enduring appeal, a testament to our unending fascination with courage, struggle, and the fight for something greater. In the tiny village of Smiljan, Croatia, where sheep outnumbered people and the most exciting event might involve a particularly dramatic thunderstorm, a young Nikola Tesla was busy defying the laws of nature, or at least trying to. Born on a stormy night in 1856, Tesla seemed destined to dance with electricity from the get-go. His mother, Georgina, reputedly remarked that he was a child of light, though she probably didn't foresee just how literally he'd take that nickname. Even as a kid, Tesla wasn't satisfied with the mundane. While his peers were content with simple toys, Nikola was more interested in turning the world upside down, sometimes literally. Take, for example, the time young Nikola attempted to fly using an umbrella. Yes, you heard that right. Armed with nothing but an umbrella and a healthy disregard for gravity, he leapt off the roof of the family barn. Spoiler alert, the umbrella didn't transform into a makeshift parachute. It turns out that while Mary Poppins might have glided gracefully, Tesla found himself very much grounded, probably with a few bruises to show for it. But even a failed flight couldn't dim his curiosity. Tesla's childhood was a mix of quirky experiments and the kind of imagination that could spark electricity in a haystack. He was known for his eidetic memory, a trait that would later serve him well in his groundbreaking inventions. Legend has it that he could recite entire books from memory, which sounds impressive until you realize that in 19th century Croatia, there wasn't exactly a Netflix to distract him. His father, Milutin Tesla, was an Eastern Orthodox priest and a writer, and his mother, despite her lack of formal education, was an inventor in her own right. She crafted household appliances and gadgets, a knack that Nikola clearly inherited. By the time Tesla was a teenager, he had already developed an obsession with electricity. He'd watch thunderstorms with the kind of intensity most kids reserved for candy stores, mesmerized by the flashes of lightning. One could say that while most people saw danger in a storm, Tesla saw potential. He famously recounted a moment during his youth when he vowed to harness the power of Niagara Falls. At the time, it sounded as plausible as a kid today declaring they'll colonize Mars. But Tesla had a habit of turning the improbable into reality. In 1875, Tesla enrolled at the Austrian Polytechnic in Graz on a military frontier scholarship. It was here that he first encountered the Graham dynamo, a machine that reverses direct current. While most students would admire it from a safe distance, Tesla dove headfirst into its workings. often arguing with his professors about the possibilities of alternating current. It's worth noting that this was a time when AC was about as popular as a mosquito at a picnic. Direct current was the darling of the electrical world, championed by none other than Thomas Edison himself. But Tesla, always the contrarian, saw the future in AC. By 1884, after a stint working for the Edison Company in Paris, Tesla decided it was time to make his mark in America. And so, with a paltry 4 cents in his pocket, some poems, and a head full of electrifying ideas, he boarded a ship bound for New York. Now, the romanticized tale of the immigrant dream often glosses over the less glamorous parts, like the reality of arriving in a bustling city with barely enough change for a cup of coffee. But Tesla wasn't deterred. His mind was his currency, and he was ready to spend it. Upon his arrival, Tesla's first job was, ironically, working for Edison. The two men couldn't be more different. Where Edison was a shrewd businessman with a penchant for the practical, Tesla was a visionary dreamer, often more concerned with the purity of his inventions than their commercial viability. Their partnership was short-lived, ending with a rather infamous fallout over a promised bonus that never materialized. Tesla had been tasked with improving Edison's direct current generators and was promised $50,000 if successful. When he completed the task, Edison reportedly told him, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." Tesla, unimpressed by this particular brand of humor, quit. But Tesla wasn't one to wallow in defeat. His mind was teeming with ideas, and he soon found backers who shared his vision. By the late 1880, Tesla had secured patents for his AC motor and power systems, setting the stage for what would become known as the War of the Currents. This was a battle of electrical distribution systems that pitted Tesla's alternating current against Edison's direct current. Spoiler alert, AC won, lighting up the world in a way that DC never could. Tesla's journey from the boy with the umbrella to the man who electrified the world is a testament to relentless curiosity and a refusal to be grounded by convention. Sure, he was an eccentric. His obsession with pigeons and aversion to pearls are legendary, but it's often the quirks that come with genius. As Tesla once said, "The present is theirs. The future, for which I really worked, is mine." And with that, he set the stage for the electric age, one spark at a time. Just as Tesla was beginning to bask in the glow of his AC motor's success, the stage was set for one of history's most electrifying showdowns. Picture this, the late 19th century, an era when America was itching to light up its cities like a Christmas tree all year round. But the question was, which electrical system would lead the charge? Enter Thomas Edison, the wizard of Menlo Park, armed with his trusty direct current DC system. Edison, ever the savvy businessman, had already wired parts of Manhattan with his DC power plants, and he was eager to expand his empire. Meanwhile, Tesla, with his alternating current, AC, was ready to prove that lightning could indeed strike twice, or in this case, alternate repeatedly. Now, here's where the tale gets juicier than a ripe watermelon in July, the so-called War of Currents. It wasn't just a technical debate. It was a full-blown PR battle with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Edison, who had a flair for drama, went on a campaign to discredit AC, warning that the higher voltage posed a lethal threat. He even staged public demonstrations where animals were electrocuted with AC to drive the point home. Yes, it was as grim as it sounds, and about as scientifically objective as a tabloid headline. But let's not be too quick to judge Edison. The man was trying to protect his interests in the electric industry, valued at millions of dollars. Serious money in an era when a loaf of bread cost a nickel. Edison's DC system required power stations every mile or so due to voltage drop, which meant more infrastructure, more investments, and of course more profits for Edison. AC, on the other hand, could be transmitted over long distances with minimal power loss, a fact that Tesla and his new ally, George Westinghouse, were keen to exploit. Speaking of Westinghouse, he was the financial muscle Tesla needed. A man with a penchant for innovation and a wallet to match. Westinghouse saw the potential in Tesla's AC patents and acquired them for a cool $60,000, a king's ransom at the time, not to mention stocks, and a royalty per horsepower of electricity sold. Nikola's financial woes were momentarily eased, though it's worth noting that Tesla was more interested in the brilliance of his inventions than the color of his money. Westinghouse and Tesla's partnership was akin to a tech startup today disrupting an old industry. They were the Silicon Valley of their time, challenging the status quo with AC technology. And their big break came at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, where they illuminated the fairgrounds with AC power. It was a dazzling display, literally, and one that left Edison's DC looking like yesterday's news. Yet, despite the glittering success, the road was anything but smooth. The financial stakes were high, and Westinghouse's company was bleeding cash faster than a leaky faucet due to the fierce competition. The economic realities of the Gilded Age were a harsh wake-up call. It was a period of rapid industrialization, but also of economic instability, and the panic of 1893 hit like a thunderbolt, sending markets into a tailspin. Westinghouse, struggling to keep his company afloat, was forced to renegotiate his deal with Tesla, asking him to waive his royalties to save Westinghouse Electric from bankruptcy. Tesla, ever the altruist, or perhaps just not a shrewd businessman, tore up the royalty contract, supposedly worth millions. This move, while noble, left Tesla financially vulnerable in the long run. It was a classic case of genius being outmaneuvered by the cold, hard world of business. Tesla's inventions were groundbreaking, but the economic landscape was as unforgiving as New York City rent. Meanwhile, Edison had his own troubles. His company was absorbed into the conglomerate that became General Electric, a move that effectively ended his direct involvement in the electricity business, although his legacy as an inventor remained untarnished. The War of Currents finally reached its climax at Niagara Falls in 1896, when Tesla and Westinghouse's AC system was chosen to transmit power from the mighty falls to Buffalo, New York, over 20 miles away. It was a triumph of engineering and a vindication of Tesla's vision. AC had won the battle, and it wasn't long before it became the standard for electrical power distribution worldwide. But let's not get too carried away by the romance of the story. While Tesla basked in the glory of scientific victory, the business world moved on, often leaving him in its dust. Edison, ever the pragmatist, continued to innovate in other fields, proving that while he might have lost the battle, he was far from losing the war. The War of Currents wasn't just a battle over technology. It was a clash of visions, personalities, and the cruel realities of capitalism. It's easy to romanticize Tesla as the underdog genius, and there's truth in that narrative. But it's also worth remembering that the world doesn't always reward innovation with riches. Tesla's AC system may have lit up the world, but it was Edison and others who profited most handsomely from the electrification of society. The War of Currents is a reminder that the history of innovation is as much about the grit of business as it is about the spark of genius. And for Tesla, despite his indelible mark on history, the future he worked for was often one he could only admire from the sidelines. As the world buzzed with electric excitement, Tesla's story was far from over. His mind, ever fertile and unyielding, would continue to explore the possibilities of wireless energy and beyond. But that's a tale for another time, because as we know, the best stories are the ones that leave you wanting more. Now, as Tesla basked in the afterglow of his AC triumph at Niagara Falls, his mind was already sprinting toward the next frontier, wireless energy. The man wasn't content with merely lighting up the world. He wanted to do it without wires, the way nature intended, at least according to Tesla's grand vision. Enter the Tesla coil, one of his most famous inventions. Picture this, a device that could shoot lightning bolts, the kind of machine a mad scientist would be proud to call his own. And yet it wasn't just for show. This contraption was Tesla's ticket to the future, a future where electricity would flow through the air like an invisible river. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the Tesla coil, which made its debut in 1891. This was an era when electricity was still a mysterious force, half science, half wizardry. The Tesla coil was a transformer capable of producing high voltage, low current, high-frequency alternating current electricity. It was the kind of invention that screamed, "Look at me," and people did. Demonstrations of the coil were spectacles of electric arcs dancing in the air, a precursor to the rock concerts of later years, minus the guitars and pyrotechnics. Tesla's demonstrations were legendary, and they captured the public's imagination, even if the practical applications were still a bit fuzzy. Now, what was Tesla really up to with this coil business? He had his sights set on a world where power could be transmitted wirelessly. The man was dreaming of Wi-Fi before anyone knew what a Fi was. He envisioned a globe connected by wireless communication, powered by towers that could send energy through the earth and air. If it sounds like science fiction, that's because it was, at least in the late 19th century. But Tesla was nothing if not ambitious, and his ambitions soon took shape in the form of the Wardenclyffe Tower. Ah, Wardenclyffe, a name that evokes images of Gothic mysteries and grand ambitions. Located on Long Island, New York, this was Tesla's magnum opus, a 187-foot tower crowned with a 68-foot dome, designed to wirelessly transmit energy across the globe. Construction began in 1901, funded by none other than J.P. Morgan, the financial titan of the era. Morgan invested $150,000, equivalent to about $5 million today, lured by the promise of a worldwide wireless communication system. For Tesla, this was more than a project. It was a testament to his belief that energy should be free and available to all. However, the devil, as they say, is in the details, or in this case, the economics. Tesla's vision of free energy didn't exactly align with Morgan's business model, which was more about profits than philanthropy. As costs ballooned, Tesla's penchant for perfectionism didn't help. The project began to falter. The final nail in the coffin was Guglielmo Marconi's successful transatlantic radio signal in 1901, which, much to Tesla's chagrin, was achieved using several of his patents. Marconi was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909, which must have felt like a slap in the face to Tesla, who famously remarked, "Marconi is a good fellow. Let him continue. He's using 17 of my patents." Wardenclyffe Tower was never completed, and in 1917 it was demolished for scrap to pay off Tesla's mounting debts. It was a bitter end to a dream that flickered brightly, if only for a moment. The financial disaster of Wardenclyffe was a harsh reminder that in the battle between idealism and capitalism, the latter often wins. Tesla's vision of a wireless world was sidelined, a casualty of economic realities and competing technologies. Yet even amid these setbacks, Tesla's genius persisted. He continued to experiment, tinker and dream, often in solitude, his mind a hive of activity. He was known for working late into the night, fueled by an endless stream of ideas, and presumably a lack of sleep. Tesla's eccentricities became as legendary as his inventions. He was a germaphobe who claimed never to shake hands, and he had an aversion to round objects, particularly pearls. Imagine that, a man who could harness the power of the Niagara Falls, but couldn't bear the sight of a pearl necklace. Despite these quirks, or perhaps because of them, Tesla remained a magnetic figure, attracting both admiration and skepticism. His ideas were often dismissed as fanciful, yet they laid the groundwork for future innovations. The concept of wireless energy, for instance, would eventually resurface in the form of radio, radar, and even the wireless chargers we use today. Tesla was ahead of his time, a visionary who saw the future but didn't always live to see it realized. Financially, Tesla was often on shaky ground, a stark contrast to his towering intellect. He lived in a series of New York hotels, racking up bills that he couldn't always pay. In 1934, Westinghouse Electric provided him with a modest stipend to cover his living expenses, a gesture of goodwill towards the man who had once electrified the world. Yet, Tesla's financial struggles were a constant shadow, a reminder that while genius can light up a room, it doesn't always pay the rent. By the time Tesla passed away in 1943, in his suite at the New Yorker Hotel, he was a forgotten figure in a world that had moved on to new heroes and new technologies. He died alone, but his legacy was anything but lonely. Tesla's contributions to science and technology are monumental, and his ideas continue to resonate, sparking curiosity and innovation in each new generation. The myth of Tesla is as captivating as the man himself, a blend of genius, eccentricity, and tragedy. It's easy to get swept up in the romance of his story, to see him as the archetypal misunderstood genius. But let's not forget the harsh realities he faced: financial ruin, professional rivalries, and the relentless march of progress that often left him behind. Tesla's life, was a testament to the power of imagination, but also a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of idealism in a world governed by practicality. As we delve deeper into Tesla's life and legacy, let's keep our eyes open to both the magic and the mayhem, because the story of Nikola Tesla is far from over, and the best is yet to come. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we'll continue to unravel the enigma of a man who dared to dream beyond the stars. As we turn the page to Nikola Tesla's later years, it's a bit like watching a dazzling fireworks show fade into the dark, still mesmerizing, but tinged with a bittersweet hush. By the time he hit his twilight years, Tesla was less a celebrated luminary and more a shadowy figure roaming the corridors of New York hotels, leaving unpaid bills like breadcrumbs in a tale of genius turned ghost. You see, Tesla's life was a peculiar cocktail of brilliance and bewilderment, particularly in his later years. Financial ruin and public obscurity had become his constant companions, with the world moving on to new marvels and fresh faces. The man who once lit up the 1893 World's Fair with alternating current was now more likely to be found feeding pigeons in Bryant Park, a far cry from the grandeur of his earlier achievements. Let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say, the pigeon. Tesla's affection for pigeons wasn't just a casual pastime. It was a full-blown passion. He reportedly spent hours at a time feeding and caring for these birds, even claiming to have a special bond with a particular white pigeon that visited him daily. Tesla once said, "I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman, and she loved me." A sentiment that, while touching, also highlights his increasingly eccentric behavior. Don't let the romanticism fool you. This was a man perhaps seeking solace in simple companionship amidst the chaos of a world that had moved on without him. Now, onto the infamous death ray, a tale as tantalizing as it is exaggerated. Tesla did, in fact, propose a peace ray, which he claimed could bring an end to war by annihilating attacking forces from afar, reducing them to dust before they could even reach their destination. In 1934, Tesla described this invention as a teleforce weapon that could send concentrated beams of particles through the air, capable of bringing down a fleet of 10,000 airplanes at a distance of 250 miles. Impressive, right? But here's the kicker. It never existed outside the confines of Tesla's mind. The plans, if they existed at all, never materialized into a working model. It was the stuff of comic books and sci-fi more than military arsenals. The death ray myth, however, did have its allure. It captured the public imagination and tantalized governments with the promise of unimaginable power. The Soviets, for instance, reportedly showed interest, offering a modest sum of $25,000 for the plans. But alas, like much of Tesla's later work, the promise outshone the reality. The weapon remained a figment of Tesla's fertile imagination, a testament to both his enduring genius and his increasing disconnect from the practical world. Tesla's later years were marked by a stark contrast to his earlier fame, a transition from celebrated inventor to overlooked eccentric. It's a narrative as tragic as it is compelling, illustrating how a genius can become a relic of their own time. In the 1930s, as the world careened toward another global conflict, Tesla's ideas were often dismissed as the ramblings of an old man out of step with the times. Yet he continued to dream, even as his financial situation deteriorated. By 1934, Tesla's financial woes were so dire that he accepted a modest stipend from Westinghouse Electric to cover his living expenses. It was a far cry from the fortune he might have amassed had he been more financially savvy. Remember those AC patents? Had Tesla not torn up his royalty contract, he might have been swimming in wealth rather than drowning in debt. It's a stark reminder that in the world of innovation, brilliance alone isn't always enough to keep the wolves at bay. And let's not overlook the political and social factors at play. The economic instability of the Great Depression didn't exactly create an environment ripe for investing in speculative technology, no matter how visionary. The world was struggling to stay afloat, and the kind of groundbreaking research Tesla was known for had taken a backseat to more immediate concerns. Meanwhile, the rise of new scientific minds meant that Tesla's star was overshadowed by other luminaries. However, despite his financial and social decline, Tesla's mind was as sharp as ever. He continued to file patents, explore new ideas, and engage in correspondence with scientists and inventors around the world. His work laid the groundwork for many technologies we take for granted today, from wireless communication to renewable energy. Even during his final years, Tesla remained committed to his vision of a better world, driven by an unyielding belief in the power of science. His death in 1943, in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel, was a quiet event, marked by the absence of the fanfare that had once surrounded his life. He passed away alone, but his legacy was far from forgotten. In the years that followed, Tesla's contributions to science and technology were rediscovered and celebrated, cementing his place as one of history's greatest inventors. His ideas, once dismissed as fanciful, have become the foundation for modern innovation, proving that genius, though often unappreciated in its time, can illuminate the path for future generations. So as we reflect on Tesla's later years, let's remember the man not just for his quirks and eccentricities, but for the indelible mark he left on the world. His life is a poignant reminder that the line between genius and obscurity can be as thin as a strand of copper wire, and that the most groundbreaking ideas often come from the most unexpected places. As we prepare to delve even deeper into the enigma of Tesla, let's keep our eyes open to both the romance and the reality of his extraordinary life. Stay tuned, because there's more to this electrifying tale than meets the eye. And so, Tesla's legacy flickers on, long after the man himself has shuffled off this mortal coil, leaving behind a world still catching up with his electrifying mind. Fast forward to today, and you'll find Tesla's fingerprints on the pulse of modern innovation in ways that would probably make the man himself smirk, with a mix of vindication and amusement. Take wireless technology, for instance. The entire universe of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and even the smartphone in your pocket owes a nod to Tesla's early dreams of wireless energy. It's like Tesla was walking around with the blueprint for the 21st century, back when most folks were just getting used to the idea of electric light bulbs. It's as if he could see the future, while the rest of the world squinted at candle flames. His experiments with the Tesla coil and the notion of transmitting energy through the air laid the groundwork for the wireless communication that's as ubiquitous today as bad reality TV. Then there's renewable energy, that modern-day holy grail of sustainable living. Tesla was a green energy guru before it was cool, tinkering with ideas of harnessing natural forces like wind and solar power. He famously envisioned harnessing the energy of Niagara Falls, and while he might not have lived to see solar panels on suburban rooftops, his pioneering work in AC power provided the foundation for the electrification of remote areas, a crucial step towards sustainable energy solutions. But let's not kid ourselves. Tesla's life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. His financial struggles and social isolation serve as a sobering reminder that genius often comes with a hefty price tag. It's a narrative that's as old as time. Brilliant minds often find themselves at odds with the practical world. In Tesla's case, he was a visionary who gazed so far into the future that he occasionally tripped over the present. Yet, in the grand tapestry of history, Tesla's star has undergone quite the resurgence, thanks to a curious mix of pop culture and tech enthusiasts who have resurrected his name from the dusty annals of forgotten inventors. The 21st century has seen a renaissance of Tesla mania, fueled by everything from documentaries to Tesla Motors, the electric car company that's as much a homage to the man as it is a nod to his vision of a cleaner, electrified world. It's as if the modern world collectively decided to say, "Sorry for doubting you, Nikola. You were right all along." Indeed, Tesla's reputation has been turbocharged by the tech-driven zeitgeist, transforming him from an obscure historical figure into a cultural icon. His life story, peppered with eccentricities and peppered by the occasional pigeon, has found a new audience captivated by the romance of his genius. It's a narrative that appeals to the dreamer in all of us, the idea that a single person, armed with nothing but imagination and sheer stubbornness, can change the world. But while we romanticize Tesla's brilliance, it's crucial to acknowledge the harsh realities that accompanied his journey. His story is a testament to the fact that genius is often a double-edged sword, one that cuts through convention but can also wound the wielder. Tesla's life was a dance between innovation and isolation, a reminder that progress often comes at a personal cost. So, what lessons can we glean from the life of Nikola Tesla? Perhaps it's the reminder that while the world may not always be ready for revolutionary ideas, those ideas can still shape the future in ways unimaginable. Tesla's perseverance in the face of skepticism and adversity serves as a beacon for those who dare to dream differently. His story is a poignant illustration of the fine line between brilliance and madness, a dance that often requires a leap of faith into the unknown. As we close this chapter on Tesla's legacy, let's carry forward the spark of his vision. The man who once lit up the world with alternating current has left behind a legacy that continues to illuminate our path. In the annals of history, Tesla's name stands as a symbol of what it means to see beyond the horizon, to dream big, and to push the boundaries of what's possible. And so, as we slip into the quiet contemplation of Tesla's impact, perhaps his greatest legacy is the reminder that in a world that often favors the practical, there is still room for the dreamers, the visionaries, and the eccentrics. Because, after all, it's these very souls who light up the darkness, one electrifying idea at a time. In the bustling chaos of the ancient Mediterranean, Carthage was like the cool kid in school who just knew how to work the room. You know the type, effortlessly charming, always at the center of every conversation, and somehow, magically, friends with everyone. But how exactly did Carthage go from zero to hero, transforming into a glittering hub of trade and influence? Strap in, my friends, because it's one heck of a story filled with strategic brilliance, a prime piece of real estate, and a legendary queen whose PR skills would make any modern influencer blush. Let's start with location. Location. Carthage was perched on the northeastern tip of what is now Tunisia, smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean sea routes. It's like if ancient traders had a GPS, Carthage would be the "you have arrived at your destination" of the ancient world. The city was founded in the 9th century BCE, and if you're thinking it was just a stroke of luck, think again. The Phoenicians, who were the OG mariners and traders of the ancient world, knew exactly what they were doing. With major trade winds and currents practically pointing neon signs towards Carthage, it was the perfect pit stop for ships laden with goods ranging from precious metals to, yes, the ever-important purple dye they were famous for. But wait, who was steering this ship? Enter Queen Dido, the woman, the myth, the legend. According to Virgil's Aeneid asterisk, because every good story needs a side of epic poetry, Dido fled her hometown of Tyre after a bit of a family tiff that involved her brother Pygmalion's murder antics. She landed on the North African coast, and in a classic case of making lemons into lemonade, negotiated with the locals to buy as much land as could be covered by an ox hide. And here's where Dido's genius shines through. She cut that ox hide into thin strips to encircle a sizable chunk of prime coastal real estate. Move over, Silicon Valley. Of course, like any good legend, Dido's story is a delightful mix of fact and fiction with a sprinkle of ancient embellishment. Carthage's founding, around 814 BCE according to traditional dates, is as much about strategic settlement as it is about savvy storytelling. Why let the truth get in the way of a good narrative, especially when it positions Carthage as a city born from cleverness and determination? The tale of Queen Dido also served as a convenient piece of propaganda for Carthage, emphasizing their cunning and resourcefulness, traits they wore with pride. In reality, Carthage's rise to trade supremacy wasn't just the result of a shrewd queen and a well-placed harbor. It was more like a well-played chess game, where every move was calculated for maximum advantage. The Phoenicians, who started this whole Carthaginian adventure, were no strangers to the trade game. Originating from what is now Lebanon, these seafaring entrepreneurs were the global shipping magnates of their day, establishing colonies and trade outposts all over the Mediterranean. Carthage, founded by Phoenician settlers, soon became the crown jewel of these outposts, outshining its mother city of Tyre in wealth and influence. The city's strategic position allowed it to control the trade routes that crisscrossed the Mediterranean. And in the ancient world, trade routes meant power. Carthage exported everything from precious metals and textiles to agricultural products, all while importing the exotic wonders of the ancient world. Their ships were the SUVs of the sea, large, sturdy, and able to carry tons of cargo across long distances. By around 500 BCE, Carthage had not only become a dominant maritime power, but also a linchpin in the vast trade network stretching from the western Mediterranean to the Near East. But it wasn't just about location and logistics. It was also about savvy business practices. The Carthaginians were masters of negotiation and diplomacy. They formed alliances with other powerful entities, like the Etruscans and even the Greeks, when it suited their needs. These alliances were not just about shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. They were strategic moves to ensure that Carthage remained at the top of the trading food chain. And when negotiation didn't work, Carthage wasn't above flexing its military muscle to protect its interests. They understood that, in the cutthroat world of ancient trade, sometimes you needed a little bit of stick to go along with the carrot. So, with a prime location, a legendary origin story, and an ironclad grip on Mediterranean trade, Carthage was sitting pretty. But let's not get too starry-eyed. Behind the shining facade of gold and purple dyes, there was the gritty reality of a city that was always on the brink of conflict. Carthage's wealth and power made it a target, and its neighbors weren't exactly lining up to be its best friends. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's toast to Queen Dido's oxhide and the shrewd Carthaginians who turned a patch of North African coast into a Mediterranean powerhouse. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Carthaginian trade, where the real action happens, not just in glamorous legends, but in the gritty hustle of ancient economics. Carthage wasn't just some charming Mediterranean stopover. It was the grand central station of the ancient world, with ships coming and going faster than you can say, Phoenician pragmatism. The heart of this operation was the Carthaginian harbor, a marvel of ancient engineering with two distinct sections. One for merchant ships, bustling with goods and salty sea banter, and the other a military port, designed like a donut with a central island. A Carthaginian innovation that was part fortress, part naval garage. The military side was such a well-guarded secret that you'd have a better chance sneaking a selfie with the Sphinx than catching a glimpse of it back then. But let's talk routes, the lifeblood of Carthaginian commerce. Picture a web stretching from the Near East to the Iberian Peninsula, with Carthage as the glittering spider at its center. Carthaginian ships sailed to every corner of the Mediterranean, from the tin mines of Cornwall. Yes, that's right, those ancient mariners reached foggy Britannia for its prized tin to the gold-rich lands of West Africa. The Carthaginians were like ancient GPS pioneers, charting reliable sea paths and mastering the art of navigation long before compasses were a twinkle in some inventor's eye. And what were they trading, you ask? Almost everything under the sun. Carthage was the Amazon of antiquity, dealing in precious metals, textiles, spices, and of course, the infamous Tyrian purple dye, a status symbol so potent it was basically the ancient equivalent of rolling up to a party in a Lamborghini. But it wasn't just about luxury items. Carthage was also a major player in the grain market, trading in wheat from Sicily and North Africa, feeding hungry mouths across the Mediterranean. This ability to supply staple goods, as well as luxury items, ensured that Carthage was indispensable to the economies of its trading partners. Now, let's talk logistics. Carthaginian ships were the workhorses of the sea, capable of carrying 100 tons of cargo across vast distances, impressive even by today's standards. These vessels were powered by both sails and oars, offering a hybrid of speed and strength. They were built for endurance, able to withstand the unpredictable moods of the Mediterranean. The Carthaginians were such masters of maritime logistics that they even had a monopoly on the supply of Spanish silver, which they shipped back to Carthage to mint coins. That's right, they didn't just trade in silver. They controlled the entire production line from mine to mint. But success breeds competition, and Carthage had rivals breathing down its neck like it was a reality show villain. The Greeks, with their own maritime ambitions, weren't exactly sending Christmas cards to Carthage. The two powers clashed periodically over control of Sicily, a strategically crucial piece of real estate. These skirmishes were less about who controlled the best beach spots and more about who controlled the lucrative trade routes that passed through the island. The Carthaginians weren't just shrewd merchants. They were also adept at playing the ancient geopolitical chess game. They forged alliances when beneficial, sometimes switching sides faster than you can say, mercantile diplomacy. For instance, their alliances with the Etruscans helped them secure trade routes in the western Mediterranean, while their sometimes frenemy relationship with Rome would eventually lead to a series of epic confrontations. But let's not jump ahead. That drama deserves its own spotlight. In terms of economic impact, Carthage's trade networks were nothing short of transformative. By the 3rd century BCE, Carthage was wielding its economic might like a seasoned poker player with an unbeatable hand. The city's wealth was legendary, its coffers swelling with the profits of its extensive trade networks. This economic muscle allowed Carthage to build a formidable navy and a mercenary army, which in turn protected its trade interests. It was an economic feedback loop that kept Carthage ahead of the competition, at least for a while. Yet, beneath the glamorous veneer of Carthage's wealth and influence lay the complexities of maintaining such a vast network. Keeping a competitive edge wasn't just about shrewd business acumen. It also required a touch of ruthlessness. Carthage wasn't shy about using military force to protect its trade routes and keep competitors in check. Their naval prowess was legendary, and their ships could be seen patrolling the waters of their trade empire like ancient coast guards on a mission. The Carthaginians also relied heavily on mercenaries to protect their interests, a practice that was both a strength and a vulnerability. On the one hand, it allowed Carthage to project military power without relying solely on its citizenry. On the other hand, mercenaries could be fickle, loyal to the highest bidder and not necessarily to the Carthaginian state. This reliance on mercenary forces would eventually come back to bite Carthage, but that's a story for another time. And so, we find Carthage at the height of its power, a city-state whose influence stretched across continents, driven by a potent mix of commerce, cunning, and a dash of audacity. As we sail through this saga, remember that Carthage's story is as much about the harsh realities of trade and power as it is about the romantic allure of ancient legends. Stay tuned, because the plot is about to thicken, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, with Carthage flexing its economic muscles like a bodybuilder on a protein binge, let's delve into the brilliant, and sometimes brutal, political maneuvers that kept its trade empire cruising. Carthage didn't just sit on its laurels, counting coins and sipping wine. Oh no, it was out there, shaking hands, forging alliances, and occasionally twisting arms to protect its interests. In the grand theater of ancient geopolitics, Carthage was the master playwright, crafting a narrative of dominance through diplomacy, and when needed, a judicious application of force. First up, the Etruscans. This alliance was like peanut butter and jelly, a deliciously strategic pairing that allowed Carthage to secure its western Mediterranean flank. The Etruscans, who called what is now Tuscany home, were no slouches. They were sophisticated, seafaring, and shared Carthage's knack for trade. Together, they kept the Greeks, who had their own eyes on Mediterranean dominance, in check. This was all about mutual benefit. Carthage got a buffer against Greek incursion, while the Etruscans enjoyed access to Carthaginian trade routes. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, ancient style. But this wasn't just about keeping friends close. Carthage was also a past master at the art of the frenemy. Take Syracuse, for instance. This Greek city-state in Sicily was a perpetual thorn in Carthage's side, yet also a potential partner. The two cities danced a delicate tango of alliances and hostilities, both understanding that control of Sicily was crucial. Sicily was the crossroads of Mediterranean trade, a veritable buffet of grain, olives, and wine. Controlling it was like having the keys to the pantry of the ancient world. Carthage knew that keeping Syracuse close, even if it meant occasional skirmishes, was better than letting it fall into more hostile hands. Speaking of Sicily, let's talk about the First Sicilian War. This was Carthage's opening act in its long-running tussle with Greek city-states for control of the island. The war kicked off around 480 BCE, time when Carthage decided to flex its muscles and attempt to bring the whole of Sicily under its control. The result, a bit of a mixed bag. Carthage's forces were defeated at the Battle of Himera by a coalition of Greek city-states. But here's the plot twist. Despite the defeat, Carthage didn't lose its grip entirely. It held onto the western part of Sicily, a crucial foothold that allowed it to maintain its trade routes and continue its economic dominance. Now, pivot to the east, and you'll find Carthage dabbling in the affairs of the Near East. In a world where trade winds dictated alliances, Carthage knew that having friends in high places could pay off. The city formed ties with powerful states like Egypt, securing access to the rich grain fields of the Nile Delta. This wasn't just about filling Carthaginian granaries. It was also about ensuring that Carthage could feed its people and armies, a cornerstone of its ability to project power. The Egyptians, in turn, got access to Carthage's extensive trade network, a win-win situation that kept both parties content. And let's not forget the ever-present shadow of Rome. At this point in our story, Rome was still a scrappy city-state, not yet the empire of marble and might it would become. But even in its early days, Carthage was wise to keep an eye on its Italian neighbor. Initially, the two cities enjoyed a cordial relationship, formalized by treaties like the one signed in 509 BCE. This treaty, the earliest recorded between Rome and Carthage, was a classic case of "I'll stay out of your backyard if you stay out of mine." It delineated spheres of influence and trade rights, ensuring both parties could operate without stepping on each other's toes, for the moment at least. Now, let's swing back to Carthage's home turf. In North Africa, Carthage was the undisputed heavyweight champion, but it wasn't just about muscle. The city used a mix of diplomacy and incentives to keep local tribes in line. Carthage offered protection and trade opportunities in exchange for loyalty, a sort of ancient protection racket, if you will. This ensured a stable hinterland, vital for a city that relied on agricultural products like grain and olives to fuel its economy. But even the best-laid plans have their hiccups. Carthage's reliance on mercenaries, while a boon for projecting power, also posed a risk. These hired guns were loyal to the purse, not necessarily the city. It was a double-edged sword, effective for quick military campaigns, but prone to instability if the pay stopped flowing. This precarious balance was a constant juggling act for Carthage, one that required deft political maneuvering to maintain. In the end, Carthage's approach to geopolitics was like a master class in realpolitik. It understood that power wasn't just about who had the biggest navy or the most gold, but about who could best navigate the complex web of alliances and enmities that defined the ancient world. Carthage's leaders were less concerned with ideology and more focused on outcomes, a pragmatism that allowed the city to thrive in an environment where the only constant was change. As we set the stage for the next chapter in Carthage's story, remember that this wasn't just about trade or war. It was about survival in a world where fortunes could change as swiftly as the Mediterranean tides. Carthage's mastery of the political chessboard ensured its place as a powerhouse of the ancient world, but the game was far from over. Stay tuned, because the stakes are about to get even higher, and trust me, the drama is just getting started. So, we've set the stage with Carthage as the heavyweight champion of ancient trade, a city that could out-negotiate, outsail, and outmaneuver just about anyone else in the ancient Mediterranean. But before you start imagining Carthage as some kind of ancient Beverly Hills, draped in gold and oozing opulence, let's take a closer look at the reality. Because, as with any great story, there's a lot more beneath the surface. First up, the myth of unending wealth. Sure, Carthage had its coffers filled with silver, but managing a trade empire wasn't all sipping wine and counting coins. Running a commercial juggernaut came with its share of headaches. For starters, piracy was the ancient equivalent of modern-day cybersecurity threats. Carthaginian merchants had to deal with pirates like a tech company deals with hackers, always one step behind and trying to patch the holes. These weren't just your run-of-the-mill scallywags either. Pirates in the ancient Mediterranean were organized, dangerous, and often in cahoots with rival states eager to swipe a piece of Carthage's pie. Speaking of pies, let's not forget the cutthroat competition. Carthage was like the Amazon of its day, but unlike Jeff Bezos, they couldn't just buy out the competition. The Greeks, Romans, and even local North African tribes were constantly gunning for them. Holding on to its empire required a combination of military might and relentless diplomacy, all while keeping one eye on the ledger. The Carthaginians had to balance the books while fending off rivals. That's no small feat when your economy depends on goods arriving safely from far-off lands. Now, let's talk about the social structure of Carthage, and spoiler alert, it wasn't all sunshine and democracy. Carthage was ruled by a wealthy aristocracy who controlled most of the wealth and the political reins. The society was like a high-stakes poker game where only a few players had any real chips. This oligarchic system meant that power was concentrated in the hands of a few families who controlled the city's senate, known as the Council of 104. Their job, to keep the city's affairs running smoothly, or at least as smoothly as possible in a world where a wrong move could sink them faster than a lead balloon. And while the city's elite were living it up, the average Carthaginian was likely more familiar with the taste of hard work than luxury. The city's economy was heavily reliant on both free labor and slavery, and the gap between the haves and have-nots was wider than the Strait of Gibraltar. The majority of Carthaginians were craftsmen, farmers, or laborers, working day in and day out to support the opulent lifestyles of their rulers. Slaves, often captured from rival states or purchased through trade, were the backbone of the economy, doing everything from household chores to manning the oars of Carthage's mighty fleet. But wait, there's more. A city doesn't just run on trade and governance. It needs to feed its people. That's where Carthage's agricultural policies came into play. The city didn't just rely on trade to fill its granaries. It had a robust agricultural system in its North African heartland. The fertile lands surrounding Carthage were like the breadbasket of the ancient world, yielding crops that were crucial for sustaining the population and supporting the army. Wheat, barley, and olives were the staples, and Carthage's agricultural prowess ensured that it could weather storms, both literal and metaphorical. Now, let's dive into the gritty world of Carthaginian politics. Remember that Council of 104 I mentioned? Well, they weren't just a bunch of bureaucrats. These guys were the power brokers, the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes. But power, as they say, corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The council was often plagued by internal strife, with factions vying for control and influence. It was like a never-ending game of political chess, where alliances shifted faster than the Mediterranean wind. The struggle for power within Carthage was as fierce as any battle fought on the seas, and it often boiled over into the public sphere. Speaking of public life, religion played a significant role in Carthaginian society, and it was as complex as it was important. The Carthaginians worshipped a pantheon of gods, with Baal-Hamon as the chief deity. Religious rituals were an integral part of the social fabric, and temples were not just places of worship. They were centers of economic and political activity. Sacrifices, both animal and human, were not uncommon, and while this might sound shocking, it was part of the religious tradition designed to appease the gods and ensure continued prosperity. But let's not sugarcoat it. The specter of human sacrifice is one of the most controversial aspects of Carthaginian culture, and it's where myth and reality clash head-on. Roman and Greek sources, not exactly unbiased observers, painted Carthage as a city drenched in blood, eager to sacrifice its young to gain favor with the gods. But historians today debate the scale of these practices. It's likely that the truth lies somewhere in between the sensational tales of ancient writers and the archaeological evidence. And then there's the question of Carthage's ultimate downfall, but that's a tale for another time. For now, suffice it to say that running a trade empire wasn't just about sailing the seas and striking deals. It was about navigating a complex web of social, economic, and political challenges, all while trying to keep the city's coffers full. Carthage may have been a city of immense wealth, but it was also a city of immense pressure. So, as we wrap up this section of our journey through Carthaginian history, remember that the story of Carthage is one of both romance and reality. The city's glittering image as a trade titan is matched only by the gritty realities of its internal struggles and external threats. The myths of endless wealth and power are as alluring as they are misleading, and the truth, as always, is far more complicated. Stay tuned, my friends, because the saga of Carthage is far from over, and the next chapter promises more intrigue and drama than a season finale of your favorite show. So, as the Carthaginian saga continues, let's dive into the real drama, the kind that makes the asterisk Game of Thrones asterisk seem like a cozy fireside chat. Carthage's dazzling trade empire wasn't just resting on laurels and counting coins. Oh no, they were about to face their fiercest competitors yet, the Romans. Cue the asterisk Jaws asterisk theme music, because this is where things get shark-infested. Enter the Punic Wars, a trilogy of conflicts so epic Even Hollywood would struggle to do them justice. These wars were less about trading insults and more about trading blows over who would rule the Mediterranean waves. The First Punic War kicked off in 264 BCE, and it was all about Sicily, the jewel of the Mediterranean. Carthage had long held sway over parts of the island, using it as a strategic grain-producing foothold. But Rome, the scrappy underdog that nobody saw coming, wanted a slice of that Sicilian pie too. The war dragged on for 23 years. Yes, you heard that right. 23 years of naval battles, sieges, and more back and forth than a tennis match. Carthage, with its formidable navy, seemed poised to maintain its grip. Yet, in a masterstroke of innovation, Rome built its own fleet from scratch, complete with a nifty invention called the corvus, a boarding device that turned naval battles into land ones, where Roman legions excelled. By 241 BCE, Rome's persistence paid off with a victory at the Battle of the Aegates Islands. Carthage had to sue for peace, relinquishing Sicily and paying Rome a hefty indemnity, 200 talents, which in today's money would buy you a small country or two. But Carthage wasn't out for the count just yet. Fast forward to 218 BCE, and we're into the Second Punic War, starring none other than Hannibal Barca, the military genius who thought elephants were the perfect travel companions for crossing the Alps. Forget airmen. Hannibal's route was the original off-the-beaten-path adventure. His audacious move to invade Italy from the north caught the Romans with their togas down. For 16 years, Hannibal rampaged through the Italian countryside, winning battles like the infamous one at Cannae in 216 BCE, where he encircled and decimated a Roman army twice his size. Yet, despite his tactical brilliance, Hannibal faced the harsh reality of logistics. With supply lines stretched thinner than a hipster's patience at a pop-up kale market, couldn't secure a decisive victory. Meanwhile, Rome, playing the long game, struck at Carthage holdings in Iberia and North Africa. By 202 BCE, the tables turned at the Battle of Zama, where Scipio Africanus outmaneuvered Hannibal, ending the Second Punic War. Carthage was once again forced to pay up and surrender its overseas empire, leaving it a shadow of its former self. Now, the Third Punic War was less a war and more a tragic finale. By 149 BCE, Rome, tired of Carthage's lingering presence, decided to wipe it off the map entirely. The siege of Carthage lasted 3 years, culminating in 146 BCE with the city's complete destruction. Roman soldiers razed it to the ground, and according to legend, salted the earth to ensure nothing would grow there again, though historians today are skeptical about the salt. The city was obliterated, its people sold into slavery, and Carthage was no more. So, what did the fall of Carthage mean for the Mediterranean trade landscape? Imagine a bustling marketplace suddenly devoid of its most charismatic vendor. With Carthage gone, Rome was free to dominate the Mediterranean, turning it into what they proudly called Mare Nostrum, our sea. They controlled trade routes, absorbed Carthage's former territories, and set the stage for an empire that would last 5 centuries. The economic and cultural influence of Rome spread far and wide, reshaping the ancient world. But let's not forget the lessons Carthage's rise and fall offer. The city-state was a testament to the power of commerce and strategic alliances, showing that trade could be a kingmaker in the ancient world. Yet, it also highlighted the dangers of relying too heavily on mercenaries and the need for strong internal unity. Carthage's reliance on hired soldiers was its Achilles heel, a vulnerability exploited by Rome with ruthless efficiency. Moreover, Carthage's story is a reminder of the capricious nature of power. A city that once held sway over the seas was brought low by a combination of Roman tenacity and its own internal strife. The myths of Carthage's untouchable wealth and might were as alluring as they were misleading. In the end, it was not just the clash of armies, but the clash of strategies and wills that sealed its fate. So, as we close the book on Carthage, remember its legacy isn't just one of defeat. It's a cautionary tale of ambition, innovation, and the relentless march of history. Carthage's glittering rise and catastrophic fall are a testament to the ever-changing tides of fortune that define human endeavor. As they say, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it, but hopefully with fewer elephants. And there you have it, folks. From the shrewd maneuvers of Queen Dido to the battlegrounds of the Punic Wars, Carthage's story is as dynamic as the Mediterranean winds that once filled its sails. A tale of triumph and tragedy. It leaves us with lessons as enduring as the ruins that whisper its name. So next time you hear of Carthage, think not just of what was lost, but of what was learned. The Carthaginian spirit, though extinguished, flickers on in the annals of history, a bright beacon of human ambition and resilience. In the year 742, a baby was born who would grow up to have a name that was bigger than his sword. No small feat, considering the girth of medieval weaponry. Meet Charlemagne, though before he could claim such a grand title, he was simply Charles, son of Pepin the Short and Bertrada of Leon. Now, Pepin may have been called the Short, but his ambitions were anything but. Standing, perhaps, at a modest height himself. Ironic for a man so intent on expanding his family's stature. Pepin was the first Frankish king anointed by the Pope. Talk about starting a trend. He was the big cheese of the Carolingian family, a house known for mixing politics with piety in the cauldron of early medieval Europe. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the family dynamics, because what family history is complete without a little drama? Pepin's rise to power wasn't exactly a peaceful ascension. You see, the Frankish kingship was originally held by the Merovingian dynasty, a bunch of long-haired rulers who were more figureheads than actual heads of state, often compared to the Kardashians of their time, minus the reality TV. Pepin, not one to sit in the shadows, decided it was high time the real power broker got a promotion. With a slight nudge from the Pope, who was looking for protection against the Lombards in Italy, Pepin dethroned the last Merovingian king and took the crown for himself in 751. The deal was simple. Pepin provided muscle, the Pope provided divine legitimacy, a medieval quid pro quo. And then there was Bertrada, Charlemagne's mother, who was no wallflower herself. Known as Bertrada with the big foot, her nickname suggests either a unique anatomical feature or just a flair for the dramatic. She was a formidable political player, adept at navigating the treacherous waters of Frankish politics. Together, Pepin and Bertrada formed a powerhouse couple that would have made even modern power couples green with envy. Think of them as the Jay-Z and Beyoncé of the 8th century, minus the music videos. Now, into this mix of ambition and intrigue was born Charles, destined to be a giant in more ways than one. Legend has it that Charlemagne stood over 6 feet tall, a towering figure in a time when the average height was closer to a hobbit's than a hero's. This impressive stature only fed into the legends that would surround him later in life, as if being tall was a prerequisite for greatness. But Charlemagne's height was more than just a physical attribute. It became a symbol of his larger-than-life aspirations and achievements. In an age when rulers were often judged by their physical presence as much as their political acumen, Charles had both in spades. So, what was it like to grow up in the Frankish court? Picture a Game of Thrones-style upbringing, full of intrigue, alliances, and the occasional backstabbing. Charles and his brother Carloman were being groomed for leadership, a fact that would later lead to its own set of sibling rivalries. But for now, they were the sons of a king, and that meant a life of privilege, education, and training in the arts of war and governance. The Frankish court was a place where you learned to ride a horse before you could walk, where Latin was spoken alongside the guttural sounds of Old Frankish, and where the church played as much a role in state affairs as the sword and shield. Charles's early life was steeped in the chaotic politics of 8th century Europe. The continent was a patchwork quilt of petty kingdoms and duchies, each ruled by a lord with a title as long as his lineage. The Frankish kingdom, under Pepin's rule, was one of the most powerful, and young Charles would have been acutely aware of the responsibility that came with his family's name. As he grew, so did the Frankish ambitions, and Charles would soon learn that to maintain power, you had to be prepared to fight for it. By the time Charles was in his mid-20s, his father Pepin had passed away in 768, and the Frankish kingdom was divided between him and his brother Carloman. This was a common practice designed to prevent squabbles over succession, but in reality, it was like handing two brothers the keys to a sports car and telling them to share. Predictably, tensions simmered between the two, with each brother eyeing the other's territory like a cat eyeing a particularly juicy mouse. However, fate had a way of simplifying matters. and in 771, Carloman died suddenly, leaving Charles as the undisputed king of the Franks. Whether it was divine intervention, a touch of medieval intrigue, or just plain bad luck for Carloman, the result was a single, unchallenged ruler. With the stage set and the crown firmly on his head, Charlemagne was ready to make his mark. He was about to step into the role that would define him, not just as a king, but as a legend. But before we delve into his conquests and the empire he would build, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer audacity it took for a man to rise from the relatively modest beginnings of his father's court to become the ruler of what was, by medieval standards, a superpower. Charlemagne, with his towering height and even loftier ambitions, was ready to take Europe by storm. But that, my friends, is a story for another time. And so, with Carloman conveniently out of the picture, whether by fate's fickle hand or a bit of medieval mischief, Charlemagne found himself as the sole ruler of the Franks. It was like receiving a surprise promotion at work, except this job came with a crown and the ever-tempting prospect of expanding his already impressive realm. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great if you're feeling fancy, had a penchant for expansion that would have made even the most ambitious real estate mogul blush. But instead of flipping houses, he was flipping entire regions. So, what's a newly minted king with a taste for conquest to do? Well, if you're Charlemagne, you set your sights southward towards Italy, home to the Lombards, a people who had been a thorn in the side of many a pope. The Lombards had been ruling parts of Italy since the late 6th century, and by the time Charlemagne came onto the scene, they were like that annoying neighbor who refuses to mow their lawn. The Pope, now the head of a spiritual empire, but lacking in worldly muscle, needed someone to play neighborhood enforcer. Enter Charlemagne, the ecclesiastical bouncer. In 773, the situation reached a boiling point. Lombard King Desiderius decided it was a good idea to march towards Rome, presumably with dreams of grandeur. Pope Adrian I, understandably not thrilled about the prospect of a Lombard parade in Vatican City, sent an SOS to Charlemagne. Charles saw an opportunity to not only aid an ally, but also to extend his influence into Italy. In 774, he marched his forces over the Alps, a feat that was less Sound of Music and more Game of Thrones in its execution. The Frankish cavalry, the medieval equivalent of a tank battalion, played a crucial role in this campaign. The Carolingian cavalry. These were the Ferraris of the Dark Ages, only with more hair and fewer emissions. Imagine a thundering herd of mounted warriors, chainmail clinking like the world's most intimidating wind chime, swords glinting in the sunlight. These guys weren't just for show. They were the backbone of Charlemagne's military might. Each knight was a nobleman or knight. The logistics of maintaining this equine entourage were nothing short of staggering. Feeding a cavalry horse was like fueling a private jet, except hay instead of jet fuel, and the maintenance was just as meticulous. The Carolingian army wasn't just a ragtag group of sword-wielding zealots. Oh no, this was a highly organized force with a feudal structure that required vassals to provide troops as part of their service to the king. Picture a medieval draft system, if you will. When Charlemagne called, you answered, and you brought your best steed too. The whole operation was a blend of feudal obligation and military necessity. Our boy Charlemagne understood the importance of logistics. He wasn't just a king, but a medieval supply chain manager. Once in Italy, Charlemagne's campaign was like a medieval blitzkrieg. The Lombards, caught off guard by the Frankish efficiency and sheer force, were pushed back with relative ease. Desiderius holed up in the fortress city of Pavia, probably wishing he'd stuck to less ambitious pursuits. After a prolonged siege that lasted through the winter, Pavia fell in the summer of 774, and Charlemagne entered the city as a conquering hero. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Charlemagne was now king of the Lombards, adding that title to his growing collection like a medieval parchment master. This conquest wasn't just about adding another notch to his belt. It was a strategic move that strengthened ties with the papacy and expanded his influence in a region that was both a political and religious hotspot. By securing Italy, Charlemagne not only protected the Pope, but also positioned himself as a defender of Christendom. Here's the thing. In the chess game of medieval politics, Charlemagne was playing 3D chess while others were still figuring out checkers. Now, let's take a moment to debunk some myths. Charlemagne's campaigns have often been romanticized as noble crusades to spread Christianity and civilization. While there was certainly an element of religious zeal, let's not kid ourselves. This was as much about power and control as it was about piety. The idea of a divinely sanctioned ruler was a powerful one, and Charlemagne wasn't above using it to legitimize his conquests. In reality, the church and state were intertwined like vines on a trellis, each supporting and strangling the other in a complex dance of power. But let's not downplay the appeal of the myth. The image of Charlemagne as a warrior king, sword in one hand and cross in the other, is a potent one. It's the stuff of legends, and legends have a way of enduring even when the cold, hard facts tell a different story. Yet, beneath the legend was a man who understood the brutal necessities of his age, a leader who knew that sometimes you had to conquer first and ask questions later. As for the logistics of running an empire that now stretched from the Pyrenees to the Italian Alps, Charlemagne was nothing if not pragmatic. He established a system of counts and local administrators, effectively decentralizing power while maintaining overall control. It was a delicate balance. Too much autonomy, and you risked rebellion. Too little, and you stifled initiative. Charlemagne walked this tightrope with the skill of a seasoned acrobat, delegating authority while ensuring loyalty through oaths and personal bonds. In the end, Charlemagne emerged from the Lombard campaign with more than just a shiny new title. He had cemented his position as the preeminent ruler of Western Europe. But as any good ruler knows, power is like holding water in your hands. Squeeze too hard, and it slips away. Charlemagne was acutely aware of this, and his subsequent actions would reflect a ruler who understood the fleeting nature of power. So, what's next for Charlemagne? With Italy under his belt, there was still much of Europe left to consider. The Saxons to the north were proving to be a particularly stubborn bunch, clinging to their pagan ways like a dog to its favorite chew toy. But that, my friends, is a saga for another day. For now, let's leave Charlemagne reveling in his Italian triumph, a king with a kingdom that was anything but small, and a vision that was as grand as the mountains he crossed to achieve it. Now that Charlemagne had Italy securely under his belt, the big man's ambitions were far from satiated. It wasn't about toasting to victories over a nice glass of medieval Merlot. It was about what came next. Europe was a chessboard, and Charlemagne was eyeing the king's gambit, reviving the Roman Empire itself. The imperial crown was like the ultimate status symbol of the age, a medieval Rolex, if you will. But how does a Frankish king go about snagging such a prize? Well, my friends, it starts with a little Christmas miracle in the year 800. Picture this. It's Christmas Day, and St. Peter's Basilica is packed tighter than a rock concert. Charlemagne kneels in prayer, or so the story goes, conveniently positioned before Pope Leo Roman III. In one of history's most theatrical moments, Leo crowns Charlemagne, Emperor of the Romans. Cue the choir and fanfare. The symbolism was as thick as the incense in the air. For Charlemagne, it was more than just a fancy title. It was a declaration that the Roman Empire lived on, now in the capable hands of the Franks. This coronation wasn't just about pomp and circumstance. It was a strategic masterstroke in Charlemagne's playbook. By becoming emperor, he wasn't just a king among kings. He was the king of kings, the top dog in Western Europe. But, and here's the rub, while the coronation was framed as a spontaneous act by the Pope, Charlemagne's involvement in orchestrating the whole affair is something historians love to debate over their morning coffee, or mead, if we're staying historically accurate. With his imperial status confirmed, Charlemagne set out to breathe life into the Roman Empire's long-lost grandeur, into the Carolingian Renaissance. If the term Renaissance conjures images of Da Vinci doodling helicopters, hold your horses. This was more about intellectual revival than artistic flourish. Charlemagne, ever the pragmatic ruler, knew that knowledge was power. So he gathered the brightest minds of his day and put them to work revamping education and literacy. The Palace School at Aachen became the Harvard of its day, minus the Ivy League elitism. Here's where we have to debunk a popular myth, Charlemagne's own literacy. Legend has it that the man couldn't write his own name, which seems a bit awkward for someone promoting learning like it was going out of style. The truth is, Charlemagne could read Latin and some Greek, but writing, that was a whole different beast. His signature was more squiggle than script. This wasn't uncommon for the time. Writing was a specialized skill reserved for scribes. So, while Charlemagne might not have been penning sonnets, he was far from illiterate, a medieval CEO who understood the value of delegation. But books and learning weren't the only things Charlemagne was reviving. He was all about reforming the administrative guts of his empire to keep the Roman flame alive. This meant a lot of paperwork and a lot of people to handle it. The empire was divided into counties, each overseen by a count. These guys were the local power brokers, managing everything from justice to taxes. Charlemagne, ever the micromanager, sent out his trusty missi dominici, think medieval auditors, to keep these counts in check. It was a system that kept the empire from splintering like a poorly made lance. Now, let's talk economics. Running an empire is not cheap. You think your monthly rent is high. Try maintaining an army, a court, and all those pesky roads and bridges. The empire's wealth was largely agrarian, and Charlemagne understood the importance of land management like a farmer with a crown. He introduced the capitulary of villae, a set of guidelines for estate management that was as detailed as your grandma's cookie recipe. But even with these reforms, the empire's economy was more barter than Bitcoin. Grain, wool, and cattle were the currency of the realm. The costs didn't end there. Maintaining the loyalty of vassals and allies required land grants and gifts, a sort of medieval Kickstarter campaign for loyalty. Charlemagne's reign saw the issuance of the denarius, a silver coin that became the standard currency, which was a step towards economic stability. But even with a currency in place, the empire faced the perennial challenge of balancing the books. It's a stark reminder that even the greatest rulers had to contend with the age-old problem of balancing budgets. Despite the heavy logistical and economic burdens, Charlemagne's efforts laid the groundwork for a unified European identity. The notion of Christendom, a community of Christian nations, began to take root. But let's not romanticize it too much. This was unity forged in the fires of conquest and the steel of swords, not peace treaties and diplomatic niceties. As for Charlemagne himself, he was a ruler who knew that to keep an empire together, you had to keep your enemies closer and your allies closer still. The imperial crown was both a blessing and a burden, a reminder that power was fleeting and had to be constantly maintained. Charlemagne's reign was a balancing act of diplomacy, warfare, and reform, a testament to the complexities of leadership in an age when a crown was both a symbol of divine right and a target for anyone with ambition and a sword. So, what's next for our intrepid emperor? The Saxons were still causing headaches up north, and the eastern borders were always a point of contention. Charlemagne had a lot on his plate, and the story of his reign is far from over. As we move forward, we'll see how his empire faced challenges both external and internal, and how Charlemagne's vision for united Europe was both a dream realized and a legacy that would shape the continent for centuries to come. But that's a saga for another time, my friends. For now, let's leave Charlemagne poised at the height of his power, a ruler who had not only built an empire, but also dared to dream of reviving the glory of Rome in a world that was anything but peaceful. And so, with Charlemagne sitting pretty atop his empire like a medieval CEO, we shift gears to the less glamorous but equally riveting parts of his rule: domestic policies, family feuds, and the all-important question of succession. If you thought the drama ended at the battlefield, buckle up. Charlemagne's personal life was like a soap opera set in chainmail. Let's start with a little something called the Carolingian minuscule. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is just another dusty footnote in the annals of history, let me assure you, this was the printing press of its time, minus the mechanical wizardry. Picture it as a sleek new font, all streamlined and sexy compared to the clunky, hard-to-read scripts of yore. Developed under Charlemagne's reign, the Carolingian minuscule was a game-changer for literacy. It made manuscripts more accessible, and by accessible, I mean you didn't need a magnifying glass and a bottle of aspirin to read them. This wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about pragmatism. Clearer script meant more efficient copying of texts, and more texts meant more knowledge spread faster than medieval gossip. Now, literacy might not seem like the juiciest topic, but consider this. Without the Carolingian minuscule, the Renaissance as we know it might have been a no-show. This script was the backbone of European literacy for centuries, and it laid the groundwork for the scribes of the future. Plus, It gave monks something to do other than brewing beer and illuminating manuscripts with psychedelic marginalia. Though, let's be honest, they still did plenty of that. But the real kicker, this script helped preserve the knowledge of the ancients, ensuring that Aristotle and Cicero didn't vanish into the ether along with the Roman Empire. Meanwhile, back at the royal court, Charlemagne's domestic life was anything but domestic bliss. The man had a whopping 18 children. Yes, 18, with multiple wives and concubines. If you think modern family gatherings are complicated, try organizing a medieval family reunion with that many offspring. It's a wonder they didn't need a seating chart the size of a battlefield map. The real kicker, though, was how Charlemagne managed his progeny. Forget the idea of primogeniture, where the eldest son gets everything. Charlemagne was more of an equal opportunity dad, divvying up his empire like a pie at Thanksgiving. But with great power comes great responsibility, or in this case, great potential for sibling rivalry. His sons, ever the ambitious bunch, were like medieval reality TV stars jockeying for the best fiefdom. Louis the Pious, Pepin the Hunchback, Charles the Younger, each with their own ambitions and, let's face it, less than stellar political savvy. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, succession. For a man who built an empire, Charlemagne's plans for passing it on were more convoluted than the plot of a telenovela. In 806, he issued the Divisio Regnorum, a decree that outlined how his empire would be split among his sons. The goal was to keep the peace, but in reality, it was like handing each kid a grenade and hoping they didn't pull the pin. Spoiler alert, they did. But before we dive into the chaos of succession, let's appreciate the economic realities that shaped these decisions. Charlemagne's empire was built on a foundation of feudal obligations, land grants, and the never-ending need for resources. His sons weren't just inheriting land. They were inheriting the responsibility to maintain a sprawling empire with all its economic, military, and political complexities. It was like passing down a family business, except this business involved more swords and fewer spreadsheets. And while we're debunking myths, let's dispel the notion of a seamless transition. Charlemagne might have been a visionary, but he wasn't clairvoyant. He knew his empire was like a Jenga tower. One wrong move, and the whole thing could come crashing down. Yet, in his later years, Charlemagne focused on consolidating his power, not just expanding it. He was keenly aware that maintaining an empire required more than just military might. It demanded political savvy and economic stability. As for the family drama, it was as much a part of Charlemagne's legacy as his conquests. His daughters, often overshadowed by their more infamous brothers, played their own roles in the political chess game. Charlemagne, perhaps ahead of his time, refused to marry them off to foreign nobility, keeping them close, and some say, under his watchful eye, to prevent any alliances that could threaten his rule. In the end, Charlemagne's later years were a testament to the challenges of ruling an empire that spanned from the Pyrenees to the Danube. His domestic policies were as much about survival as they were about governance. He was a ruler who understood that power was not just seized, but meticulously maintained, a balancing act between ambition and pragmatism. As the empire grew, so did the complexities of ruling it. Charlemagne's vision of a united Christendom was both a blessing and a burden, a testament to his ambition and a reminder of the fragility of power. His reign was a masterclass in leadership, a blend of iron-fisted rule and intellectual revival, all wrapped up in the chaotic bow of family drama. So, what's next for Charlemagne's story? As we move towards the twilight of his reign, the question of succession looms large, and the empire's stability hangs in the balance. The Saxons may have been subdued, but internal discord threatens to unravel the tapestry Charlemagne worked so hard to weave. The stage is set for the final act of his life, a saga of legacy, power, and the enduring impact of one man's dream of empire. But that, my friends, is a tale for another time. For now, let's leave Charlemagne contemplating the empire he built, a ruler whose legacy would echo through the corridors of history long after his time. As Charlemagne stood on the precipice of history, contemplating the monumental task of holding together an empire that spanned territories as vast as his ambitions, one couldn't help but wonder if he foresaw the unraveling that would follow his death in 814. The man who had been crowned emperor of the Romans by a pope on Christmas Day, who had subdued the Saxons and presided over a renaissance of learning, was not immune to the one adversary no sword could defeat: mortality. Charlemagne's passing at the age of 71 was a momentous occasion, marked by the kind of ceremony only a ruler of his stature could command. He died on January 28, 814, succumbing to a fever after a week of illness. His body was interred in the Basilica of St. Denis, wrapped in a shroud and placed in a marble sarcophagus, a fittingly grand send-off for a man who had lived a life larger than legend. But while his mortal coil was laid to rest, his legacy was anything but peaceful. The empire he left behind was a marvel of medieval statecraft, a patchwork quilt of cultures, languages, and laws stitched together by Charlemagne's sheer force of will. Yet, like any quilt, it was prone to fraying at the edges. Frankish tradition of dividing inheritance among sons, a practice that Charlemagne himself had followed, proved to be the empire's undoing. His surviving son, Louis the Pious, faced the Herculean task of maintaining unity. Unfortunately, Louis lacked his father's charisma and military prowess, and the empire began to fissure like an overcooked soufflé. Within a few short decades, what was once a single, imposing entity splintered into what would become Germany, France, and Italy. The Treaty of Verdun in 843, a mere 29 years after Charlemagne's death, formalized the division of his empire among his grandsons. It was an event that historians have described as the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire's complex and often contradictory history. The political fragmentation was as inevitable as it was rapid, and Europe returned to its familiar state of feudal patchwork. It's almost as if Charlemagne's empire was a sandcastle, impressive while intact, but vulnerable to the tides of familial squabble and external pressure. Yet, despite this fragmentation, Charlemagne's impact on European history was profound and enduring. He was dubbed the Father of Europe, not because he left behind a unified continent, but because he laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the European identity. His reign was a turning point, a moment when the idea of a unified Christian Europe took root. The Carolingian Renaissance wasn't just a cultural revival. It was a seedbed for the intellectual and artistic flowering that would come centuries later. Libraries swelled with books, monasteries became centers of learning, and the use of Latin as a lingua franca helped knit disparate regions together. Charlemagne's influence extended beyond borders and centuries. His revival of the Roman imperial title set a precedent that would echo through history, inspiring countless rulers who dreamed of empire. Napoleon would later crown himself in a similar fashion, as would the Kaisers and Tsars who traced their political lineage back to Charlemagne's imperial aspirations. He had set a benchmark for leadership that, while perhaps unattainable, was a North Star for future statesmen. But let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. Charlemagne's reign was also a time of brutal warfare and forced conversions, a reminder that the sword was as much a tool of unification as any treaty or marriage alliance. His campaigns against the Saxons were ruthless, marked by the massacre of Verdun in 782, where 500 Saxon rebels were reportedly executed. These acts were part of his mission to consolidate power and spread Christianity. Yet they also highlight the darker side of empire building, a side that modern narratives often gloss over in favor of more palatable myths. Yet it's precisely this blend of grandeur and grit that makes Charlemagne's story so compelling. He was a ruler of contradictions, a warrior who valued education, a leader who embraced tradition while pushing for reform, and a king whose legacy was both a monument and a cautionary tale. The myths that have grown around him are as much a part of his legacy as his actual deeds, a testament to the human penchant for storytelling. His life, though steeped in the trappings of medieval power, offers timeless lessons. Charlemagne's story is a reminder that leadership is as much about managing complexity as it is about vision. His ability to balance the competing demands of church and state, family and empire, makes him a figure of perpetual fascination. He understood the power of symbols and the importance of education, and while his empire may have fragmented, his influence endured. In the end, Charlemagne's legacy is a mosaic of triumphs and trials, a canvas painted with the hues of ambition and the shadows of human frailty. The empire he built may have crumbled, but the ideas he championed, unity, learning, and the resilience of a shared identity, continue to resonate. as Europe evolved through the centuries. Charlemagne's dream of a cohesive, educated, and Christian continent remained a touchstone. While he was not the last to attempt such a feat, his efforts were among the first to leave an indelible mark on the continent's collective memory. And so, as the curtain falls on our tale of Charlemagne, we are left with the image of a ruler whose reach exceeded his grasp, yet whose grasp was formidable nonetheless. His story is not just a chapter in the annals of history, but a testament to the enduring complexity of human ambition. Charlemagne was a giant in his time, both in stature and in legacy, a reminder that even in the fractured, chaotic world of early medieval Europe, the dream of unity and greatness was not just a fantasy, but a driving force that could shape the future. In the realm of high-altitude architecture, the Incas were the rock stars, or perhaps more accurately, the rock movers. Nestled high in the Andes, the Incan Empire stretched its stone-carving muscles across a mind-boggling landscape, building on terrain that seems more suited for mounting goats than for human civilization. We're talking about a society that decided the best place to call home was where the air is so thin you might need an oxygen tank just to catch your breath. As if the altitude wasn't enough, they went ahead and constructed Machu Picchu, a site that could double as a postcard for vertigo. Now, let's get some perspective. The Incan Empire at its peak covered about 770,000 square miles, cutting through modern-day Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. That's roughly the size of modern-day Mexico, and it's not exactly flat land. The Andes Mountains present a topographical roller coaster, yet the Incas managed to build an empire here without a single-wheeled vehicle or draft animal. Imagine moving house without a moving truck. That's the Inca experience, only with stones weighing several tons. Speaking of stones, let's talk about Machu Picchu. This isn't just a pile of rocks on a hill. It's an architectural wonderland, perched at 970 feet above sea level. The site itself is a masterclass in Incan engineering. They didn't just fling some stones together and call it a day. Each stone was meticulously cut to fit together without mortar, a technique that rivals modern jigsaw puzzles. In a world where earthquakes are as common as a bad Wi-Fi connection, the Incas crafted structures that could ride out the tremors like seasoned surfers. Consider this. Machu Picchu took over 50 years to build, from around 1,450 to 1,500. That's half a century of heaving stones up a mountain without cranes, bulldozers, or even the wheel. The Incas instead relied on a system of ramps, levers, and sheer human grit. It's an engineering feat that makes you wonder if they were part human, part mountain goat. And let's not forget the roads. The Incan road system stretched over 25,000 miles, a number that would make any modern transportation planner break out in a cold sweat. These roads connected the empire like a vast network of stone veins, circulating people, goods, and ideas across the rugged Andean landscape. The Incas were masters of their rocky environment, turning natural disadvantages into architectural advantages. Take their earthquake-proof buildings, for instance. The secret sauce, a technique called ashlar masonry, where stones are cut precisely to fit together so snugly that not even a piece of paper can slip between them. When the earth shook, these structures would dance rather than crumble. Picture a stone samba, if you will. It's a skill that modern engineers look at with envy, especially when dealing with their own seismic challenges. But let's not romanticize the Incas into some mythic civilization of superhumans with mystical powers over stone and earth. The reality is that their construction feats were the result of intense labor and organization. The empire was a well-oiled machine, powered by a system called mida, a labor tax that required subjects to contribute work to the state. It's a bit like mandatory community service, only with a lot more stone hauling. This system allowed the Incas to mobilize a massive workforce, turning their architectural dreams into reality. The Incan approach to architecture was deeply tied to their spiritual beliefs and societal structures. They saw themselves as part of the natural world, and their buildings reflect this harmony. Structures were often aligned with celestial events or mimicked the shapes of sacred landscapes. Their reverence for nature didn't stop them from making some serious modifications to the terrain, though. Terracing was a common practice, transforming steep mountainsides into arable land. These terraces also served a dual purpose, preventing landslides and erosion. It's like getting a two-for-one deal on engineering solutions. Incan cities were hubs of activity, filled with people, llamas, and the daily hustle of one of the largest empires in pre-Columbian America. Cusco, the capital, was a marvel in its own right, with its streets laid out in the shape of a puma, a sacred animal. The city was the political, military, and cultural heart of the empire, where leaders plotted conquests and priests performed rituals. It was a place where the grandeur of Incan engineering met the everyday bustle of empire life. So, the next time you find yourself grumbling about the challenges of modern construction, spare a thought for the Incas. They built a vast empire on the roof of the world, without the benefit of modern tools or technologies. Their legacy is carved into the very stones of the Andes, a testament to their ingenuity, adaptability, and sheer tenacity. Perhaps it's time we took a page out of their book, minus the high-altitude cardio, of course. And speaking of taking pages out of books, let's delve into the Incan playbook for stonework, which would give even the most seasoned Tetris player a run for their money. These folks didn't just stack stones like some prehistoric game of Jenga. They executed a sophisticated architectural strategy that transformed rugged landscapes into sturdy fortresses and temples. We're talking about an empire that could fit stones together so snugly, they might as well have been auditioning for a spot on the International Puzzle Championship circuit. Now, the Incas were nothing if not resourceful, and when it came to materials, they had a knack for using what was right under their feet, or perhaps more accurately, under their llamas' feet. Granite and limestone were their bread and butter, procured from local quarries. The Incas were experts at making the most of what was available, turning seemingly unyielding rock into a pliable substance that could be shaped into their grand designs. And they did all this without the kind of modern machinery that we take for granted. No diamond-tipped saws, no hydraulic drills, just pure muscle, determination, and a few clever tricks up their sleeves. Let's not forget that the Incas were operating in a world where the concept of the wheel was yet to revolutionize transport. That's right, they moved these massive stones, some weighing over 100 tons, without the convenience of wheeled carts. Instead, they employed a system of logs and ramps, essentially creating a conveyor belt by rolling the stones on logs. It's a method that might sound primitive, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This labor-intensive process was powered by a workforce that was part of the meter system, a kind of national service that made the empire's grand projects possible. And let's be real, it's hard to imagine the ancient equivalent of "can you work late today?" being an easy sell, but when the state calls, you answer. Now, here's something to blow your mind. Even with all those challenges, the Incas managed to achieve a level of precision that baffles even the most seasoned architects today. The stones were shaped with such accuracy that when they were finally placed, they didn't need mortar to hold them together. They relied on stone-to-stone friction, a technique called ashlar masonry, which allowed the buildings to withstand the frequent seismic activity of the region. Imagine crafting something that could endure earthquakes without a single crack, while our modern skyscrapers shudder at the mere thought of a tremor. And what about the costs? Let's just say, if you think your home renovation budget is spiraling out of control, the Incan projects would probably give you a heart attack. The sheer human effort and resources required would have cost billions in today's dollars. Consider this. The construction of just one Incan site, like Sacsayhuaman, with its zigzagging walls and massive boulders, would set you back an estimated $5 billion today. That's the GDP of a small country dedicated to what was essentially a community fort. And yet, the Incas managed to pull it off, thanks to their highly organized society and a system that equated labor with civic duty. Speaking of civic duty, the Incas had a way of aligning their structures with astronomical events, a testament to their keen observational skills and understanding of the cosmos. Structures were often positioned to capture the sun during solstices, turning buildings into celestial calendars. It's like Stonehenge, but with a lot more altitude and a lot less tourist graffiti. This alignment wasn't just for show. It was deeply woven into the spiritual and agricultural fabric of Incan life, guiding everything from planting cycles to religious ceremonies. But let's get back to the stones, because who doesn't love a good rock story? The real artistry was in the details. The Incas would spend hours, days, even weeks shaping a single block to ensure it slid into place perfectly, like a piece in a grand stone puzzle. They used tools made from harder stones and bronze to achieve this level of precision, a process that must have been painstakingly slow. But patience was a virtue the Incas had in spades, or should I say, in quarries. As we marvel at their techniques, it's important to remember that this wasn't just about creating pretty structures. The Incas were building an empire, quite literally from the ground up. Their constructions were a testament to their power and influence, a physical manifestation of their ability to dominate nature and bend it to their will. Each stone laid was a piece of political propaganda, a reminder of the empire's might and ingenuity. So, the next time you find yourself caught in a renovation project that's dragging on, just think of the Incas, hauling stones without the benefit of modern technology, crafting buildings that would stand for centuries. It's a humbling thought, really. And while we might not be chiseling stones with the same precision, there's a lesson to be learned in their perseverance and adaptability. After all, if you can build an empire without a single power tool, just imagine what you could accomplish with a little bit of grit and a whole lot of ingenuity. But let's not get too carried away by the romance of chiseling stones without a power tool. We need to dig deeper into why the Incas went to such great lengths to create these architectural masterpieces. Was it purely about flexing their imperial muscles, or was there a deeper, more profound motivation? As we step back and gaze at the grand tapestry of the Incan Empire, it becomes clear that their constructions were more than just physical structures. They were a potent blend of power symbols, spiritual sanctuaries, and sheer human ingenuity. First up, let's talk about the big P, power. In a world where the might of an empire was often measured by the grandeur of its monuments, the Incan elite were all about sending a message. And boy, did they deliver it with panache. Their cities and temples weren't just places to hang out and have a llama latte. They were statements of dominance. These structures screamed, "Hey, look at us. We've got this whole empire thing figured out." The fact that they pulled it off in the Andes, a place where even the air feels like it's got something to prove, adds an extra layer of bravado. And then there were the gods. The Incas believed that their monumental architecture served as earthly extensions of celestial designs. They saw the divine in the very rocks they painstakingly carved. Temples and shrines were aligned with the stars, sun and moon, ensuring the gods were always in the loop, which, by the way, is a pretty clever way to keep the divine on your side. Imagine the Incas nudging each other and saying, "You know, I think the sun god would really appreciate this solstice alignment. Maybe he'll throw us some good harvest vibes." And let's face it, if you were living at those altitudes, you'd want all the cosmic goodwill you could muster. Now, speaking of goodwill, let's dive into the labor system that made all this grandeur possible. Enter the Mida, a system that was less about a paycheck and more about communal obligation. Picture a society where your contribution to the empire wasn't measured by the hours you clocked in, but by the stones you helped move. This labor tax required every able-bodied citizen to work for the state for a certain number of days each year. Modern HR departments might have a meltdown trying to organize such a workforce, but for the Incas, it was an efficient, if not slightly coercive, way to marshal manpower. And boy, did they marshal it. The Mida system was like a well-oiled machine, turning the gears of the empire with a precision that rivaled their stone-cutting skills. It was a bit like a giant national team-building exercise, with the entire population getting in on the action. Sure, it wasn't all fun and games, but if you were an Incan, you didn't really have a choice. When the empire called, you put down your quinoa and picked up a chisel. Now, let's sprinkle in some humor, because you have to wonder what a modern HR department would think of the Mida. Imagine the job postings. Wanted, 10,000 stone haulers for an indefinite term. Benefits include spiritual fulfillment and the satisfaction of empire building. Must love heights. It's doubtful that mandatory labor tax would fly in today's job market, but for the Incas, it was as integral to their society as the stones were to their buildings. But let's not get too misty-eyed about the Mida system. While it was effective, it was also a reflection of the empire's control over its people. It was a system that ensured the state could mobilize a massive workforce at a moment's notice. The ability to summon thousands of workers was not just about building impressive structures. It was about maintaining the machinery of power. The mirror was as much a tool of governance as it was of construction, ensuring that the populace remained firmly under the thumb of the ruling elite. In this way, the Incas achieved a delicate balance between persuasion and coercion, with architecture serving as both carrot and stick. The grandeur of their buildings was a testament to what could be achieved through collective effort, but it was also a reminder of who called the shots. Each stone laid was a declaration of imperial authority, a testament to the empire's ability to orchestrate labor on a massive scale. And let's not forget the economic impact of these projects. Incan construction wasn't just about showcasing power. It was a significant driver of the economy. The demand for materials, the need for skilled laborers, and the logistics of transporting goods all stimulated economic activity. It was a virtuous cycle. The construction of grand edifices bolstered the economy, which in turn fueled further building projects. It's like a pre-modern version of the stimulus package, only instead of infrastructure spending, you had stones and more stones. So, as we admire the legacy of Incan architecture, it's important to acknowledge the complex web of factors that brought these structures into being. They were the product of a sophisticated society, one that harnessed human labor and natural resources to create something truly remarkable. The Incas may have lacked modern technology, but they more than made up for it with organization, ingenuity, and a healthy dose of determination. As we continue our journey through the Incan Empire, we'll explore even more of the societal and political intricacies that fueled their architectural feats. From the spiritual to the practical, the motivations behind these constructions were as varied as they were compelling. So stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover in the story of the Incas and their monumental achievements. As we continue our exploration of the Incan Empire, it's crucial to pull back the curtain on some of the myths that have clung to their architectural feats like overzealous barnacles. First up, let's address the elephant, or should I say alien, in the room. Yes, the notion that extraterrestrials had a hand in Incan architecture has been bouncing around more than a ping-pong ball in a hurricane. The theory goes something like this. The Incas couldn't possibly have achieved such architectural precision without a little help from our friends in the cosmos. But let's get real here. The idea that aliens were hovering over the Andes, offering masonry tips, is about as plausible as finding a Starbucks on Machu Picchu. Now, why do these extraterrestrial theories get so much traction? Well, partly because they're a thrilling escape from reality. It's a lot more fun to imagine little green men with laser levels than to picture a bunch of humans sweating it out on a mountain. However, the real story is one of grit, sheer determination, and the kind of problem-solving skills that would put today's engineers to shame. The Incas used a combination of local materials, ingenious techniques, and a workforce that could rival any modern construction crew in terms of scale and coordination. And they did it all under the watchful eye of the sun, not the distant gaze of Martians. Now, let's dig into our historical sources, the Spanish chroniclers, who often had a flair for the dramatic that could rival any Hollywood screenwriter. When the Spanish conquistadors first stumbled upon Incan architecture, they were understandably gobsmacked. Here they were, expecting a bunch of simple huts, and instead they found grand stone cities that seemed to defy logic. Their accounts often read like tall tales, filled with exaggerations and misunderstandings. And why not? It suited their narrative to depict the New World as a land of wonders, ripe for the taking. Take Pedro Cieza de Leon, a Spanish chronicler whose writings paint a picture of awe and disbelief. His descriptions of Incan sites often border on the fantastical, not because he was intentionally misleading, but because he was trying to wrap his head around something that was so utterly foreign to his European sensibilities. In his chronicles, he writes of stones that seem to have been dropped from the heavens, miraculous in their precision and size. What he didn't grasp was the back-breaking labor, the sophisticated engineering, the sheer human effort that went into every perfectly fitted stone. It was easier to chalk it up to mystery and marvel than to acknowledge the sweat and toil of thousands of hands. These chroniclers, intentionally or not, contributed to a kind of romanticized mythology that persists to this day. The Incas became legends, their achievements viewed through a lens of awe and mysticism. But let's not forget that the reality was far more grounded and far more impressive. The Incas didn't just wish their architectural wonders into existence. They planned, they calculated, and they executed with a precision that boggles the mind even now. Now, here's a juicy tidbit. These Spanish chroniclers, in their quest to impress their European audience, often left out the gritty details. They didn't talk about the logistics of hauling stones up steep mountain paths or the organization required to feed and house a massive workforce. They glossed over the fact that the Incas had developed a sophisticated understanding of geometry and astronomy, skills that allowed them to align their structures with celestial events. Instead, they focused on the spectacle, the grandeur, the jaw-dropping scale of it all, reinforcing the notion that what they were witnessing was beyond human capability. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. While these chroniclers might have been prone to embellishment, their accounts still provide valuable insights. They highlight the incredulity that European explorers felt when confronted with a civilization that defied their expectations. They also underscore the cultural disconnect, a reminder that what seems miraculous to one group might be commonplace to another. Now, let's pivot to some hard facts that anchor us back to reality. The construction of Incan sites like Machu Picchu was a monumental task, requiring a staggering amount of resources and manpower. The stones used in these structures were often quarried miles away, transported using a combination of rolling logs and human muscle. Imagine coordinating a workforce of thousands, ensuring that each stone was precisely cut and placed, all without the aid of modern machinery. It's enough to make any project manager break out in a cold sweat. And yet, the Incas pulled it off with aplomb. They had an intimate understanding of their environment and utilized it to their advantage. The stones were carefully selected for their durability and aesthetic appeal, forming a harmonious blend with the rugged landscape. They employed techniques like ashlar masonry, where stones were cut and fit together with such precision that they remained stable without mortar. This wasn't just functional. It was a testament to their mastery of their craft. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The reality of Incan construction was far from idyllic. It was labor-intensive, physically demanding, and often dangerous. Workers faced the constant threat of injury or worse, and the empire's expectations were high. The Mida system, while effective, was also a form of control, ensuring that everyone contributed to the state's grand ambitions. It was a system that demanded much of its people, blending civic duty with coercion. Yet, amidst the blood, sweat, and tears, the Incas achieved something extraordinary. Their architecture wasn't just about creating imposing structures. It was about crafting a legacy, a lasting testament to their ingenuity and resilience. Each stone laid was a testament to their ability to thrive in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. So, as we continue to untangle the myths from the reality, let's give credit where it's due. The Incas didn't need aliens or divine intervention to achieve their architectural feats. They relied on their ingenuity, their organization, and their sheer determination. Their legacy is a testament to the power of human endeavor, a reminder that with enough grit and perseverance, even the loftiest of dreams can be carved into stone. And speaking of stone, there's plenty more to uncover in the saga of the Incan Empire. From their ingenious agricultural practices to the intricacies of their political system, there are countless stories waiting to be told. So stick around, because the tale of the Incas is far from over, and there's plenty more to marvel at in their incredible history. And speaking of the saga, let's pivot to the Incan legacy, which is like a classic rock song, timeless, enduring, and occasionally misunderstood. Incas left behind more than just stones arranged with jaw-dropping precision. Their architectural genius has rippled through the annals of history, influencing modern engineering and cultural heritage in ways that would probably make any Incan architect puff up with pride, or at least raise an eyebrow in bemusement. First, let's talk durability. In a world where planned obsolescence seems to be the order of the day, looking at you, smartphones, the Incas built things to last. Machu Picchu, for example, has withstood centuries of wind, rain, and the occasional llama, all while perched precariously on a mountain ledge. It's a testament to the brilliance of their design and construction techniques. The site's ashlar masonry, with its interlocking stones, has allowed it to withstand seismic activity that would make most modern buildings shiver. These walls have weathered the test of time better than most Hollywood marriages, which is saying something. But it's not just about physical endurance. The Incan approach to architecture has seeped into the consciousness of modern engineers and architects. Their methods are studied and admired, especially in regions prone to earthquakes. The principle of flexibility, letting buildings sway rather than crack, is something that contemporary architects have taken to heart. It's like the architectural version of yoga: stay grounded, but be ready to move when the earth does. This philosophy has influenced modern seismic engineering, proving that sometimes the best ideas are the old ones. Now, let's pivot to the cultural impact of these architectural marvels. Incan sites have become symbols of national pride, particularly in Peru, where Machu Picchu is practically a national mascot. It's a tourist magnet, drawing over 1 million visitors each year, all eager to snap a selfie against the backdrop of those iconic terraces. That's a lot of people traipsing through ancient stone corridors, marveling at the handiwork of a civilization that disappeared centuries ago. These sites are more than just Instagram gold. They're cultural touchstones, connecting modern Peruvians to their rich heritage. But here's the kicker. While these sites symbolize pride and continuity, they also serve as poignant reminders of what was lost. The Incan Empire's downfall, like a great tragedy, was swift and brutal. The Spanish conquest in the 16th century wiped out much of the empire's cultural and political structures, leaving behind a legacy marred by colonialism and exploitation. The stones remain, silent witnesses to a complex history of resilience and subjugation. So, what lessons can we glean from the Incas today? For starters, there's a lot to be said for their blend of practicality and grandeur. In a world obsessed with bigger, better, faster, the Incas remind us that sometimes it's the simple, well-executed ideas that stand the test of time. They didn't need skyscrapers to make an impact. They did it with stone, sweat, and a deep understanding of their environment. Their ability to adapt to their surroundings, turning challenges into opportunities, is a lesson in resilience that's as relevant now as it was then. And let's not forget about sustainability, a buzzword that's been trending longer than most hashtags. The Incas were pioneers in sustainable living, long before it was cool. Their terracing techniques not only maximized arable land, but also prevented soil erosion, showcasing an early understanding of environmental stewardship. They worked with the land, not against it, creating a balance that modern societies are only just beginning to appreciate. Now, let's address the myths once more. The allure of the Incan Empire as a mystical, otherworldly civilization is undoubtedly captivating. But as we peel back the layers, we find a story that's even more compelling, a tale of human ingenuity, organization, and perseverance. It's a reminder that history is often more fascinating in its reality than in its legends. In the end, the real marvel of the Incan Empire lies not just in its stones, but in its enduring legacy. It's a legacy that continues to inspire architects, engineers, and dreamers alike. The Incas may have vanished, but their spirit lives on in the stones they left behind, whispering tales of a people who dared to carve their dreams into the mountains. As we wrap up our journey through the architectural wonders of the Incan Empire, remember this: history is a dialogue between the past and the present. The Incas speak to us not just through their achievements, but through the lessons they impart, lessons of resilience, ingenuity, and the power of human endeavor. So, the next time you find yourself caught in the whirlwind of modern life, take a moment to remember the Incas. Because if they could build an empire on the roof of the world, what's stopping us from reaching new heights? Albert Einstein's life didn't kick off with the kind of razzle-dazzle one might expect from a future icon of brilliance. Born on March 14, 1879, in Ulm, a town that might evoke as much excitement as a soggy pretzel, Einstein entered the world with a rather lopsided head and an unusual knack for silence. An odd baby, his grandmother reportedly fretted over his hefty size, exclaiming, "Much too fat." Well, that's a family compliment for you. Fast forward a few years, and Albert wasn't precisely the poster child for academic excellence. No, young Einstein was more of a maverick in his own little world, often lost in thought. His early education in Munich didn't exactly set the stage for his later genius, as he frequently clashed with his teachers. Their rigid Prussian discipline didn't mix well with Einstein's freewheeling imagination. He was the kid who dared to question authority, a trait that would later become his signature move in the world of physics. The myth that Einstein failed math in school is about as accurate as claiming he rode a unicorn to class. In reality, he excelled at mathematics from a young age. By the time he was 12, he was tackling differential and integral calculus for fun. But like any enduring legend, the story of Einstein's supposed math failure persists because it paints a picture of a relatable genius, a late bloomer who ultimately triumphed. Who doesn't love an underdog story, right? At age 5, the universe handed young Albert a nudge in the form of a simple compass. His father, Hermann, showed him this magnetic marvel, and it was like flipping a switch inside the boy. Suddenly, the invisible forces of the universe weren't just abstract concepts. They were real, tangible mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Einstein later recalled this moment as pivotal, igniting a spark that would guide him through his groundbreaking theories. Despite his intellectual gifts, Einstein's school days were far from idyllic. He was an outsider, often isolated from his peers. Teachers found his constant questioning a nuisance rather than a sign of brilliance. One teacher famously told him, "You will never amount to anything, Einstein." Well, that prediction aged like milk left out in the sun. But at the time, it was enough to make young Albert feel like a square peg in a round hole. The humor of the situation wasn't lost on Einstein. In his later years, he would recount these stories with a twinkle in his eye, recognizing the absurdity of it all. Here was a boy whose light bulb moments would one day illuminate the darkest corners of physics, yet he was pegged as a troublemaker, a daydreamer who couldn't stick to the script. And speaking of scripts, Einstein had his own ideas about how learning should be conducted. He despised rote memorization, which was the educational fad of the day. To him, understanding the why was infinitely more valuable than parroting the what. This mindset, while at odds with his teachers, laid the groundwork for his later revolutionary ideas. He was less concerned with knowing all the answers and more interested in asking the right questions. Einstein's rebellious streak didn't just stop at questioning teachers. He had a knack for mischief that would make even a class clown proud. Once, he used a mirror to reflect sunlight into a teacher's eyes during a lesson. Sure, it wasn't exactly Nobel Prize material, but it showed a playful side that would accompany him throughout his life. He was a thinker and a joker, a combination that kept him grounded as he navigated the complex world of academia. By the time he was a teenager, Einstein's family moved to Italy, leaving him behind in Munich to finish school. But the rigid environment didn't sit well with him, and he eventually dropped out, claiming a doctor's note for a nervous breakdown. The truth was, he was simply fed up with the authoritarian schooling system. He took matters into his own hands, applying to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. This decision marked a turning point, as the Polytechnic was a haven for thinkers like him, those who thrived on creativity and innovation. Einstein's early years were a cocktail of contradictions, a genius labeled as a failure, a misfit in a world that valued conformity, a jokester with a profound understanding of the universe's mysteries. These experiences shaped him into the icon we remember today. He wasn't just a scientist. He was a renegade thinker who dared to defy expectations. And it all started with a compass, an unruly head of hair, and a penchant for asking the questions no one else dared to. Einstein's adventure at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich was like a breath of fresh alpine air, a stark departure from the stifling confines of his old school in Munich. Here, the focus was on understanding and innovation, not mindless memorization. He was a bit of a rebel, even in this more liberal environment, often skipping classes he deemed unnecessary. Who would have thought? Skipping classes and still acing exams. That's right. Young Albert was the original study smarter, not harder advocate. Einstein wasn't alone in his academic escapades. He surrounded himself with a circle of like-minded peers, including the Serbian mathematician Milva Merrick, who would later become his first wife. They bonded over late-night discussions about physics and mathematics, a nerdy romance if ever there was one. While it's a charming tale, it's important to acknowledge the complex dynamics of their relationship, which was far from the romanticized version often portrayed. They faced struggles, both personal and professional, that added layers to Einstein's life that weren't always rosy. Despite his occasional truancy, Einstein graduated in 1900 with a teaching diploma, although not without a hitch. His future wasn't exactly handed to him on a silver platter. With a diploma in hand but no job prospects, Einstein found himself in a rather precarious position. living the dream right. As reality hit, he spent the next couple of years bouncing between temporary teaching gigs and tutoring jobs, just trying to make ends meet. It wasn't until 1902 that he landed a position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, a job that would become the unexpected launching pad for his scientific creativity. Now, the Swiss Patent Office isn't exactly where you'd expect a theoretical physicist to cut his teeth, but for Einstein, it was the perfect environment for his inquisitive mind. The job was mundane enough to allow his thoughts to wander into the realms of theoretical physics. By day, he reviewed patent applications. By night, he dove into the mysteries of the universe. If anything, the patent office was his secret lab, where he daydreamed equations and concepts that would soon change the world. Einstein's tenure at the patent office coincided with what is now famously known as his miracle year, 1905. Within just 12 months, he published 4 papers that would redefine physics and propel him to international fame. Talk about making the most of your downtime. The first of these papers proposed the theory of the photoelectric effect, which would eventually win him the Nobel Prize in 1921. It was like he was saying, "Hey, light, I see what you're really made of." The second paper introduced the idea of Brownian motion, offering empirical evidence for the existence of atoms. While atoms might seem like a no-brainer today, back then, they were still a hot topic for debate. Einstein was essentially the bouncer at the Atomic Theory Club, letting the skeptics know that atoms weren't just theoretical riffraff. Then came the paper on special relativity, the piece de resistance that obliterated the notion of absolute time. Suddenly, time was no longer the steady metronome everyone thought it was. Instead, it was a wibbly-wobbly, relative thing, dependent on the observer's state of motion. The idea that time and space were intertwined was revolutionary, and it left many scratching their heads, muttering, "What just happened?" And finally, he dropped the mic with E equals mc2, a deceptively simple equation that showed mass and energy are interchangeable. This was the intellectual equivalent of a grand slam solidifying Einstein's place in scientific history. These papers weren't just academic exercises. They were bold challenges to the established scientific order, making the old guard as nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. The irony of it all was that Einstein's groundbreaking work was born from a place where innovation wasn't exactly on the agenda. The patent office was more about rubber stamps than revolutionary ideas. Yet, it was here, amidst the clutter of patent applications, that Einstein's imagination soared to new heights. It's a classic case of making lemonade when life hands you lemons, or in this case, transforming the mundane into the extraordinary. While Einstein's intellect was clearly unparalleled, he never lost his penchant for daydreaming. His ability to visualize complex concepts as simple thought experiments set him apart. He turned the universe into a cosmic playground, where he could explore ideas without the constraints of traditional mathematics or physics. This unique approach allowed him to see beyond the numbers, capturing the essence of the physical world in a way that was both profound and accessible. However, Einstein's journey was not without its challenges. His unconventional ideas faced skepticism from the scientific community, and he often had to defend his work against critics who preferred the comfort of established theories. But Einstein was undeterred. He understood that progress required stepping into the unknown, challenging the status quo, and embracing uncertainty. In a world that valued conformity, he was a beacon of creative defiance. The miracle year of 1905 was a testament to Einstein's ability to blend imagination with intellect, to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. His papers weren't just about equations and theories. They were about pushing the boundaries of human understanding, daring to ask the questions no one else dared to. They were the product of a mind that refused to be confined by the ordinary, a mind that saw the universe as a vast tapestry of interconnected mysteries. Einstein's journey from the halls of the Zurich Polytechnic to the Swiss Patent Office was a winding road filled with unexpected turns. It was a path of contradictions, where a job meant for routine allowed for revolutionary thinking, and where daydreams turned into groundbreaking discoveries. His story is a reminder that genius often finds its spark in the most unlikely of places, and that the true measure of brilliance lies not in following the script, but in rewriting it. As we leave Einstein on the brink of his newfound fame, it's clear that his journey is far from over. The world of physics is about to be upended, and our intrepid thinker is just getting started. There's more to unravel, more myths to debunk, and more insights to uncover as we continue to explore the life and legacy of Albert Einstein, the man who dared to imagine the unimaginable. And so, as the dust settled on Einstein's miracle year, the world stood on the brink of a new era, with our wild-haired protagonist poised to become its most unlikely hero. You see, while Einstein's theories were busy rattling the cages of scientific orthodoxy, the man himself was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around his burgeoning fame. By the time World War I rolled around, Einstein had already climbed to a level of celebrity that would have made even the Kardashians nod in approval. But unlike today's Instagram influencers, Einstein's rise came with its own unique set of complications. First, let's talk post-war Europe, a place where the trenches had barely cooled before the political landscape turned as volatile as a teenager's mood. The Treaty of Versailles had just been signed in 1919, leaving Germany with economic sanctions that made a game of Monopoly look like a cakewalk. In this sea of political angst, Einstein emerged as a vocal critic of militarism, a stance that was about as popular in some circles as a skunk at a garden party. He wasn't just shaking his fist at war, he was calling for a complete overhaul of the military-industrial complex, advocating for a more peaceful, cooperative Europe. But hold on, it wasn't just about peace and love. Einstein's Jewish heritage put him in a precarious position in a continent simmering with anti-Semitic sentiment. The rise of nationalist fervor made being Jewish in post-war Europe akin to walking through a minefield of prejudice. This wasn't just a theoretical threat. Einstein's growing reputation as a scientific revolutionary was met with both admiration and suspicion. Critics accused him of everything from being a foreign spy to sabotaging German science. It was like being a rock star, except the autograph requests came with a side of hate mail. Despite these challenges, 1919 was the year that really cemented Einstein's status as a global icon. Enter Sir Arthur Eddington, a British astronomer with a penchant for eclipse chasing. Eddington led an expedition to test Einstein's general theory of relativity by observing a solar eclipse. Spoiler alert. The experiment confirmed Einstein's predictions about the bending of light by gravity. Overnight, Einstein became a household name. His face splashed across newspapers worldwide. The idea that gravity could bend light was a concept so mind-bending that it left the public both awestruck and bewildered. And speaking of bewilderment, Einstein was genuinely perplexed by his newfound celebrity. Imagine being famous for something most people couldn't even pronounce, let alone understand. He once quipped, "If my theory of relativity is proven correct, Germany will claim me as a German, and France will declare that I am a citizen of the world. Should my theory prove untrue, France will say that I am a German, and Germany will declare that I am a Jew." It was a wry acknowledgement of the fickle nature of fame and national pride, delivered with the sort of dry humor that became his trademark. As if navigating the post-war political landscape wasn't enough, Einstein's life was peppered with quirky episodes that showcased his bemusement at being a media darling. Take, for instance, the time he was invited to the United States in 1921. America, in its characteristic fashion, rolled out the red carpet. Einstein was greeted like a superstar, complete with parades and fanfare. At one point, he was asked to give a speech at the Lincoln Memorial. The irony of a German-born physicist speaking at a monument to American unity was not lost on him. He later remarked that he felt like a showman rather than a scientist. His travels took him to places where his fame preceded him, often leading to situations that were both amusing and awkward. During a visit to Japan, he was mobbed by fans who treated him like a living deity. The Japanese press dubbed him an Eastern sage, a title Einstein found both flattering and mystifying. In India, he met with Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel laureate poet. The two engaged in philosophical discussions that left both men enlightened and a little bit puzzled. It was like watching two intellectual heavyweights spar, with each trying to outdo the other in a game of cerebral chess. Despite being the toast of the town, Einstein remained grounded, often poking fun at his own celebrity. He once joked, "To punish me for my contempt for authority, Fate has made me an authority myself. His humility in the face of adulation was genuine, a reflection of his belief that ideas mattered more than the person behind them. This humility was not just a charming quirk. It was a survival mechanism in a world eager to place him on a pedestal. However, Einstein's life was not all accolades and adoration. The darker side of his fame was ever present, with political tensions and anti-Semitism casting long shadows. As the 1920s roared on, Einstein's pacifist views and Jewish identity made him a target for right-wing extremists. The Nazis, in particular, viewed him as a threat, labeling his work as Jewish physics and dismissing it as a conspiracy against the Aryan race. It's a tragic irony that the very nation that claimed him as a genius would later vilify him as an enemy. Yet, through it all, Einstein remained steadfast in his principles, refusing to be swayed by the tides of public opinion or political pressure. He continued to speak out against nationalism and militarism, advocating for international cooperation and understanding. His activism wasn't just limited to words. He supported causes such as Zionism and the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, although he did so with his characteristic nuance, emphasizing cultural revival over political sovereignty. Einstein's rise to fame was a testament to the power of ideas to transcend boundaries, both intellectual and political. His theories challenged the fundamental assumptions of physics, while his advocacy for peace and equality challenged the status quo of a fractured world. He was a man who saw beyond the immediate, daring to envision a future where science and humanity coexisted harmoniously. As we leave this chapter of Einstein's life, it's clear that his journey is far from over. The world continues to grapple with the implications of his work, both scientifically and socially. Einstein's legacy is a complex tapestry of brilliance and humility, a reminder that true genius lies not in the accolades we receive, but in the courage to question, to imagine, and to dream. As we continue to explore the life and legacy of Albert Einstein, we'll delve deeper into the challenges he faced and the impact he left on the world, a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us to this day. As we dive into the next chapter of Einstein's life, it's 1933 and the world is in chaos yet again. Adolf Hitler has just been appointed Chancellor of Germany, and the Nazi regime is gearing up for its sinister reign. Einstein, with his acute sense of justice and a target on his back, decides it's time to head for the exit. And we're better to find refuge than the land of opportunity, where freedom rings and the jazz age is still echoing through the streets. Yes, folks, we're off to America. Now, if you're imagining Einstein rolling up to Ellis Island with a suitcase full of equations, you're not far off. He settled in Princeton, New Jersey, a place where ivy grows as thick as the accents. Princeton University was to be his intellectual playground for the foreseeable future. There, he took up a position at the newly founded Institute for Advanced Study, a job that sounds as prestigious as it was vague. Essentially, his role was to think, which is precisely what he did best. The Institute was a think tank, minus the tank, and with plenty of thought. Einstein's arrival in the U.S. coincided with the Great Depression, a time when the American economy was about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. Yet, he was received with open arms and a generous salary, $10,000 a year, which in 1933 was about as close to a fortune as you could get without owning an actual gold mine. While most Americans grappled with breadlines and job scarcity, Einstein was contemplating the mysteries of the cosmos, comfortably ensconced in academic luxury. But Einstein wasn't just twiddling his thumbs and scribbling equations. He quickly became a vocal participant in American political life, throwing his weight behind causes that aligned with his ideals. This included civil rights, a topic that was as contentious then as it is now. Einstein's friendship with African-American opera singer Marian Anderson is legendary. When she was denied a hotel room because of her race, Einstein offered her his own home, a gesture that was both personal and political. Yet, not all of Einstein's political actions were met with applause. His outspoken pacifism and advocacy for Jewish refugees didn't exactly make him popular with everyone. There were whispers, loud ones, about his radical ideas. During the Red Scare, he was even accused of being a communist sympathizer, a label that could have earned you a one-way ticket to a congressional hearing. But in true Einstein fashion, he brushed off the accusations with the same nonchalance he might reserve for a pesky fly. The irony, of course, is that while Einstein was advocating for peace, he was also becoming embroiled in the most destructive project of the 20th century. Enter the atomic bomb. In 1939, fellow physicists Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner approached Einstein with a pressing concern. Nazi Germany might be developing nuclear weapons. Einstein, realizing the gravity of the situation, penned a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was a letter that would set in motion the Manhattan Project, the super-secret government program to develop atomic bombs. Now, let's pause and appreciate the irony. Einstein, the pacifist, inadvertently paved the way for the creation of a weapon capable of obliterating entire cities. He later expressed deep regret for his role in this, famously stating, "If I had known that the Germans would not succeed in producing an atomic bomb, I would have never lifted a finger." It's a classic case of unintended consequences, proving that even geniuses can be blindsided by the complexities of human nature. Despite this moral quagmire, Einstein didn't shy away from expressing his opinions. His correspondence during this time reveals a man grappling with the implications of his actions. His letters, often sprinkled with his trademark humor, show a man who could see the absurdity in his situation. He once quipped to a friend, "Since the mathematicians have invaded the theory of relativity, I do not understand it myself anymore." This was Einstein in a nutshell, capable of laughing at the tangled web of science and life, even when the stakes were astronomically high. Einstein's status as a cultural icon also took on a life of its own in America. He was the subject of cartoons, songs, and even a Broadway play. People couldn't get enough of the wild-haired, pipe-smoking physicist who defied convention and seemed to embody the very spirit of innovation. Yet, while the world was busy idolizing him, Einstein remained refreshingly unimpressed by his own celebrity. His response, "Keep it real." He once said, "I am by heritage a Jew, by citizenship a Swiss, and by makeup a human being, and only a human being, without any special attachment to any state or national entity whatsoever." Talk about a mic drop. As World War II ended and the Cold War began, Einstein's activism took on new dimensions. He was a staunch advocate for nuclear disarmament, warning against the proliferation of atomic weapons. His public lectures drew thousands, and his opinions were sought by everyone from heads of state to Hollywood stars. Despite his advancing age, he remained a vocal critic of McCarthyism, racial segregation, and any form of authoritarianism. He was as much a thorn in the side of the establishment as ever, proving that you can take the man out of Europe, but you can't take the rebel out of the man. Einstein's time in America was a whirlwind of scientific discovery, political activism, and unexpected fame. He navigated this complex landscape with a blend of humor, intellect, and a steadfast commitment to his principles. His life serves as a reminder that the journey from obscurity to icon status is rarely straightforward. It's a path fraught with moral dilemmas, societal challenges, and yes, the occasional bout of irony. As we wrap up this segment of Einstein's life, it's clear that his story is far from over. The world continued to change, and so did Einstein, ever the curious observer of humanity's follies and triumphs. Stay tuned, because there's more to explore in the life of this extraordinary man who dared to question not just the universe, but the very nature of our place in it. And so, as we draw closer to the final chapters of Einstein's life, old Professor's twilight years were anything but a quiet wind down. Imagine a man who spent decades poking at the universe's secrets, now turning his attention to the mysteries of human nature and society. It's like swapping out quantum mechanics for the chaos theory of human behavior. Good luck with that, Albert. Einstein's final years in America were spent wrestling with the implications of the very science he had helped spawn. He was deeply troubled by the arms race, the Cold War's equivalent of an international staring contest with nukes involved. But instead of just shaking his fist at the sky, Einstein used his platform to advocate for peace. In 1955, he and philosopher Bertrand Russell co-authored the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, aimed at warning the world about the dangers of nuclear weapons. Talk about dropping truth bombs. Einstein was still making waves, even at 76. Let's not pretend Einstein spent all his time fretting over world peace. Nope, the man had quirks that could fill a YouTube playlist. He famously avoided sarks, declaring them unnecessary. Why? Because they get holes, of course. In Einstein's universe, sarks were just another pesky law of thermodynamics waiting to be broken. He also had a penchant for sailing, blissfully unaware of his complete lack of navigational skills. If there was a Nobel Prize for getting lost at sea, Einstein would have sailed home with it. But beyond the quirks, the myths surrounding Einstein's personal life often paint him as some kind of absent-minded genius, stumbling through life with a head full of equations. This narrative is as tempting as a chocolate eclair, but equally misleading. Yes, Einstein had his scatterbrained moments, but he was far from oblivious to the world around him. His letters reveal a man deeply engaged with the pressing issues of his time, from civil rights to Zionism. In 1952, Israel offered Einstein the presidency, a purely ceremonial role, sure, but still not your everyday job offer. Einstein, ever the humble physicist, declined. He quipped that he lacked the natural aptitude and experience for such a role. Translation: thanks, but no thanks. I've got enough on my plate trying to unify the fundamental forces of nature. If only all political rejections were this politely profound. Einstein's legacy, of course, extends far beyond his scientific achievements. He became the archetype of the genius, the wild-haired thinker whose very name became synonymous with brilliance. But let's debunk the myth of the lone genius, shall we? Einstein stood on the shoulders of giants, building upon the work of physicists like James Clerk Maxwell and Hendrik Lorentz. His genius lay not in working alone, but in connecting disparate ideas in ways no one else could. When Einstein passed away on April 18, 1955, at the age of 76, the world lost more than just a scientific luminary. It lost a moral voice. But even in death, Einstein couldn't escape the public's fascination. His brain was removed during the autopsy. Yes, you heard that right, and preserved for study, a decision that would have made anyone else roll in their grave. The idea was to unlock the secrets of his genius, but as it turns out, there was no hidden E=mc2 etched into his grey matter. The brain of Einstein was, well, just a brain. The real magic was in how he used it. The public's ongoing fascination with Einstein reveals more about us than it does about him. We're captivated by the idea of genius, perhaps because it feels like a touch of magic in an otherwise mundane world. But Einstein's life teaches us that brilliance is less about innate talent and more about relentless curiosity and the courage to defy convention. His legacy isn't just in the equations he left behind, but in the way he embodies the spirit of questioning the status quo. Einstein's story is a tapestry woven with threads of scientific breakthroughs, personal quirks, and moral convictions. He remains a symbol of what it means to challenge the boundaries of knowledge while remaining deeply connected to the human experience. In a world that often prefers the comfort of certainty, Einstein reminds us that the greatest discoveries come from embracing uncertainty and daring to ask the questions no one else will. So, as we wrap up our journey through the life of Albert Einstein, let's remember him not just as a figure of scientific genius, but as a man who dared to imagine a better world. His story is a testament to the power of ideas, the importance of questioning, and the enduring impact one person can have on the world. Here's to Einstein, the rebel thinker who taught us that the universe is far more extraordinary than we could ever imagine, and that our place in it is defined not by the answers we possess, but by the questions we dare to ask. In the bustling chaos of 12th century Italy, where the aroma of fresh bread mingled with the stench of medieval streets, a young boy named Leonardo Fibonacci was busy doing the unthinkable, getting excited about numbers. You see, this was a time when numbers were considered as thrilling as a snail race. People preferred their math like their soup, simple and without too many complications. But Fibonacci was about to shake things up, even if he didn't know it yet. Born in 1170 in Pisa, a city famous for its leaning tower that somehow never got around to straightening up, Fibonacci was the son of a wealthy merchant named Guglielmo Bonacci. Now, Guglielmo did what any self-respecting medieval businessman would do. He dealt in trade. And trade back then wasn't just a matter of swiping right to make a deal happen. It involved epic journeys across treacherous waters and bartering with people who spoke more languages than you could shake a stick at. Guglielmo, probably tired of Pisa's endless tower jokes, took a job as a trade representative in the bustling port of Bugia, located in what is now Bejaia, Algeria. This was no small move, considering the roughly 500 kilometers separating Pisa from Bugia. He dragged young Leonardo along, likely thinking this would be an excellent way to teach him the family business. But instead of haggling over spices or figuring out the going rate for a camel, young Fibonacci found himself entranced by something altogether different: Arabic numerals. Yes, those very numbers we take for granted today were, back then, a revolutionary concept. In Bugia, Fibonacci was introduced to a world of mathematics that made the Roman numerals of Europe seem as outdated as a floppy disk. He was captivated by the simplicity and elegance of the Indo-Arabic numeral system, and who could blame him? Compared to the cumbersomeness of Roman numerals, which required the mathematical acrobatics of a Cirque du Soleil performer just to calculate your lunch bill, Arabic numerals were a breath of fresh air. It's worth pausing here to appreciate the sheer absurdity of this fascination. Imagine being a kid when your peers are busy jousting or learning the fine art of tapestry, and deciding that numbers are your thing. It's like choosing to binge-watch documentaries about paint drying when everyone else is into epic sword fights and castle sieges. But Fibonacci was onto something, and his curiosity would eventually lead to a mathematical revolution. Leonardo, with the enthusiasm of a kid who'd found the secret level in a video game, dove headfirst into the study of these numerals and the mathematical techniques that came with them. He learned about zero, that mysterious placeholder that had yet to make its way into European thought. Zero, the very concept that made Roman accountants break into a cold sweat. Fibonacci didn't just dabble in this new math. He absorbed it like a sponge, realizing its potential to revolutionize trade, economics, and everyday life back in Europe. Fast forward a few years, and Fibonacci, now a well-traveled young man, returned to Pisa. He brought with him not just a tan and some exotic stories, but a mathematical toolset that would change the continent. It's like he went on a gap year and came back with the secret formula for Google. His travels across the Mediterranean had exposed him to a wealth of mathematical knowledge, from the bustling bazaars of Egypt to the scholarly circles of Constantinople. By 1202, Fibonacci had poured all this knowledge into a book he titled Liber Abaci, which translates to the Book of Calculation. While the title might not win any awards for creativity, the content was revolutionary. This wasn't just a math book, it was a manifesto for a new way of thinking. Fibonacci introduced the Western world to the delights of the decimal system and Arabic numerals, banishing the cumbersome Roman numerals to the dustbin of history, or at least pushing them to the side. But let's not get too romantic here. While Liber Abaci was a big deal in the realm of mathematics, it didn't exactly fly off the medieval shelves. Most of Europe was still figuring out how to deal with basic hygiene, let alone a new number system. And yet, the seeds had been planted. Fibonacci's work would eventually lead to the widespread adoption of these numerals, paving the way for everything from basic bookkeeping to the scientific revolution. In the end, Fibonacci was like a medieval Johnny Appleseed, planting the seeds of mathematical enlightenment wherever he went. His early fascination with numbers in an era that found them as exciting as watching grass grow was the spark that ignited a monumental shift. So next time you punch numbers into your calculator or balance your budget, spare a thought for Leonardo Fibonacci, a man who found beauty in the mundane and changed the world one digit at a time. So, as we left off with our number-loving hero, Leonardo Fibonacci, he was busy sowing the seeds of a mathematical revolution. But before we get too far ahead in this digit-driven saga, let's rewind a bit to explore how this Italian math whiz became the international man of numerals he was destined to be. Imagine a young Fibonacci setting sail across the Mediterranean like a mathematical Marco Polo, collecting numerical secrets rather than spices. Fibonacci's travels were far from a cushy cruise. Picture the Mediterranean of the 12th century, not exactly a Club Med vacation spot. We're talking about a body of water bustling with traders, pirates, and the occasional sea monster rumor. It was in these bustling ports and trading hubs that Fibonacci's education really took off. He mingled with merchants and scholars, absorbing knowledge like a sponge in a rainstorm. The Mediterranean was a melting pot of cultures, with Byzantine, Islamic, and European influences all jostling for space. This was the perfect classroom for our number-obsessed hero. Let's talk numbers, specifically the Hindu-Arabic numerals that Fibonacci encountered. These were the bay and say of the numeral world, simple, elegant, and destined for greatness. Compared to the clunky Roman numerals that had Europe in a chokehold, Hindu-Arabic numerals were a revelation. Imagine trying to do long division using Roman numerals. It's like trying to text with a rotary phone. The Hindu-Arabic system was a game changer, offering a straightforward way to represent numbers with just 10 symbols. And here's the kicker. It included 0, that enigmatic placeholder that made mathematicians' hearts race faster than a medieval joust. Fibonacci was like a kid in a candy store, soaking up advanced mathematical concepts that would have left most Europeans scratching their heads. He learned about algebra from Arab mathematicians, a branch of math that was virtually unknown in Europe at the time. Algebra was the secret sauce that made complex calculations possible, and Fibonacci was all about it. While the rest of Europe was busy figuring out how to not die from the plague, Fibonacci was learning about quadratic equations. But let's not romanticize this too much. Fibonacci wasn't just strolling through sunlit bazaars and having deep conversations over mint tea. The reality was a lot grittier. Travel back then was no joke. Think more surviving on hardtack and dodging bandits than glamorous world tour. Yet, this gritty reality was part of what made Fibonacci's accomplishments so impressive. He was willing to brave the elements, endure the hardships, and learn from cultures that many of his contemporaries viewed with suspicion. Speaking of suspicion, let's talk about Fibonacci's return to Italy and the Herculean task of convincing his fellow countrymen to ditch Roman numerals. This was about as popular as suggesting a vegan menu at a medieval feast. Roman numerals were entrenched in every aspect of life, from commerce to architecture. Convincing the Italian populace to adopt a foreign numbering system was like trying to sell ice to Eskimos. And yet, Fibonacci persisted. Why, you ask? Because he recognized the economic potential of this new system. When you're dealing with trade and commerce, efficiency is king. The Hindu-Arabic numeral system made calculations quicker and more accurate, which was a huge advantage in a world where a miscalculation could mean the difference between profit and bankruptcy. Fibonacci's mathematical evangelism was grounded in the practical benefits of this new system, a fact that might have been lost amidst the initial skepticism. And skeptical they were. The Italians, bless their hearts, were not easily swayed. They clung to their Roman numerals like a toddler clutching a favorite toy. But Fibonacci was nothing if not persistent. He returned to Pisa armed with the knowledge that could revolutionize the way people thought about numbers and trade. It was an uphill battle, but one he was willing to fight. In this cultural exchange, Fibonacci was more than a conduit for mathematical ideas. He was a bridge between worlds, a role that was as challenging as it was rewarding. He had to navigate the tricky waters of cultural identity and intellectual pride, convincing his contemporaries that adopting foreign ideas didn't mean losing their own. It was a delicate dance, requiring the diplomacy of a seasoned politician and the enthusiasm of a true believer. So, as we wrap up this leg of Fibonacci's journey, remember this. He wasn't just a mathematician. He was a visionary with the courage to challenge the status quo. His travels across the Mediterranean were more than just a series of stops on a map. They were the forging ground for ideas that would eventually reshape the world. Stay tuned, because this numerical odyssey is far from over. And so, with a fervor matched only by a toddler's dedication to avoiding nap time, Fibonacci embarked on his grand mission to spread the mathematical gospel according to Liber Abaci. This was no small feat, considering the book was a hefty tome that made your average medieval manuscript look like light reading. Published in 1202, Liber Abaci wasn't the kind of book you'd casually flick through with your morning brew. It was a dense, intricate piece of work that required serious dedication to tackle. Let's dive into this beast, shall we? At its core, Liber Abaci was a manual on how to use the Hindu-Arabic numeral system for practical purposes like accounting and trade. Imagine trying to sell this concept to people who had been doing math with Roman numerals, a system so cumbersome that counting past 10 felt like an Olympic event. Fibonacci's book was essentially saying, hey, there's a simpler way to do this. And in doing so, it planted the seeds for modern arithmetic. It was like introducing a medieval Europe hooked on horses to the concept of cars. Now, onto the part everyone loves to romanticize, the Fibonacci sequence. You know, that mystical series of numbers that seems to weave its way through everything from sunflower seeds to the spirals of galaxies. But before you get lost in the poetic allure of this sequence, let's pull the curtain back on its origins. The Fibonacci sequences claim to fame. Rabbits. Yep, those fluffy little creatures with a penchant for multiplying like they're in some kind of reproductive relay race. Fibonacci posed the sequence as a hypothetical problem in Liber Abaci. How many pairs of rabbits can be produced from one single pair in a year, under the assumption that every month each pair produces a new pair which becomes productive from the second month on? The numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on, emerged from this exercise, not as some divine revelation, but as a practical solution to a breeding problem. The sequence was less about unlocking cosmic secrets and more about understanding the logistics of rabbit husbandry. It's like discovering the secret to the universe by solving a crossword puzzle about cheese. But oh, how history loves to romanticize. The sequence's mathematical properties were later recognized, and today you'll find it revered in everything from financial markets to computer algorithms. It's the mathematical equivalent of a garage band that unexpectedly goes platinum. The sequence, initially a mundane tool for breeding bunnies, evolved into a symbol of divine proportion and aesthetic perfection. Talk about an unexpected career path. And speaking of unexpected, let's talk about how this sequence pops up in places Fibonacci probably never imagined. In nature, for instance, the sequence describes patterns of growth in everything from pine cones to the petals of a rose. It's like Mother Nature signed up for a math class and gotten a plus. This mathematical oddity even found its way into the arts, influencing the likes of the Renaissance masters. Da Vinci, for one, used these principles to create compositions that were pleasing to the eye, proving that even in art, math gets the last laugh. But let's not kid ourselves. While the Fibonacci sequence was weaving its magic through nature and art, back in Fibonacci's day, most folks were just trying to figure out how to not starve or catch the plague. The sequence's practical applications were far from the minds of medieval Europeans, who were more concerned with the price of grain than the mysteries of the universe. Still, the sequence's journey from a rabbit breeding problem to a cornerstone of mathematical beauty is nothing short of fascinating. It's a reminder that even the most mundane problems can lead to extraordinary insights. Fibonacci may not have seen the extent of his sequence's impact, but its legacy continues to ripple through time. From the spirals of a nautilus shell to the stock market's ebb and flow, the sequence is a testament to the unexpected ways simple ideas can influence the world. And what about Liber Abaci? Well, it didn't exactly make Fibonacci a medieval rock star. Sure, the book was revolutionary, but it was also dense and complex. Picture trying to spark a viral trend with a textbook on calculus. Yet, its impact was undeniable. Over time, Fibonacci's work helped transform European mathematics, laying the groundwork for everything from accounting to the scientific revolution. Fibonacci's contributions went beyond mere numbers. They represented a shift in thinking. He showed that mathematics wasn't just an abstract concept, but a tool that could be applied to solve real-world problems. His work was a step toward the modern world's reliance on numbers to navigate everything from the economy to technology. So, as we pause in this mathematical tale, remember that Fibonacci's legacy is one of unexpected twists and turns. From humble beginnings in a rabbit pen to the grandeur of Renaissance art, his ideas have left an indelible mark on history. And while his contemporaries may not have fully understood the scope of his genius, we can look back and appreciate the profound impact of his work. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover in this numerical odyssey, and we've only just scratched the surface. So here we are, at the crossroads of a mathematical revolution, where Fibonacci's work is about to turn the number-crunching world of medieval Europe upside down. Picture merchants in bustling markets, their hands stained with ink and their minds boggled by Roman numerals, which were as much use in commerce as a chocolate teapot. Enter Fibonacci's number system, a game-changer that made these merchants the medieval equivalent of Silicon Valley disruptors. Let's talk specifics. The Hindu-Arabic numeral system was more than just a fresh coat of paint on an old barn. It was a whole new architecture. This system was lean, mean, and designed for speed, making calculations that previously took hours doable in minutes. It was like swapping a horse-drawn carriage for a Ferrari. And for merchants, time was money, literally. With faster calculations, they could make decisions quicker, seize opportunities faster, and ultimately rake in the profits. Imagine a Venetian merchant in the 1200 trying to determine the cost of a shipment of spices from the east. Using Roman numerals, this task was akin to solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. But with Fibonacci's influence, suddenly they had a calculator, albeit a mental one, speeding up the process and reducing errors. The economic advantages were enormous. Merchants could now track profits, losses, and inventory with unprecedented ease, making them the Jeff Bezoses of their day. But let's not kid ourselves. The road to numerical enlightenment was about as smooth as a medieval cobblestone street. The transition from Roman numerals to Hindu-Arabic was met with more than a few skeptical eyebrows. Many saw the new arithmetic as foreign and suspicious, like a medieval version of a phishing scam. After all, this was a time when anything new and foreign was treated with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for vampires or tax collectors. The resistance wasn't just a cultural quirk. It was deeply rooted in the social fabric of the time. Roman numerals were not just numbers. They were symbols of tradition and identity. Asking people to change was like asking them to switch their allegiance from the Pope to the local juggler. It was a seismic shift that required not just mathematical understanding, but a rethinking of identity itself. It took a lot of convincing, pamphlets, and probably a fair amount of grumbling over ale to get folks to embrace this new system. Yet, slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The practical benefits of this new system were too glaring to ignore. In commercial hubs like Florence and Venice, where trade was the lifeblood of the economy, the adoption of Hindu-Arabic numerals was akin to a technological revolution. Merchants who adopted the new system found themselves with a competitive edge sharper than a knight's sword. They were processing transactions faster, reducing errors, and maximizing profits. Let's put some numbers on this. Imagine a typical trade deal involving 1,000 florins, a considerable sum back then. With Roman numerals, calculating interest rates or profit margins was a task that could take hours and a small team of scribes. However, with the new numeral system, it was like flipping a switch. Merchants could perform these calculations in a fraction of the time, freeing them up to focus on expanding their businesses rather than getting bogged down in bookkeeping. But let's not overlook the drama of it all. This wasn't just a dry shift in mathematical practice. It was a cultural revolution with all the intrigue and resistance you'd expect from a medieval soap opera. City councils debated the merits of the new system. Guilds were divided, and the clergy, ever wary of secular knowledge, viewed the changes with suspicion. It was as though the entire continent was caught in a tug-of-war between tradition and progress, with Fibonacci's numbers at the very heart of the struggle. Despite the initial resistance, the practical benefits of the Hindu-Arabic numeral system eventually won out, like a tortoise overtaking a hare. This wasn't just a victory for mathematics. It was a triumph for commerce, paving the way for the kind of economic growth that would fuel Europe's rise in the centuries to come. By the late 13th century, most major trading hubs in Italy had adopted the new system, and it was spreading across Europe faster than a medieval gossip. So, in this grand tapestry of history, where does Fibonacci fit? Not as a lone genius working in isolation, but as a catalyst for change, a bridge between cultures and a harbinger of a new era. His work laid the groundwork for a shift that would eventually lead to the Renaissance and beyond, proving that sometimes the most profound changes come from the simplest ideas. Yet, as we look back on this numerical revolution, let's not forget the human element. Fibonacci's story is a testament to the power of curiosity and the courage to challenge the status quo. It's a reminder that the future often belongs to those who dare to think differently who see potential where others see only tradition. And while Fibonacci may not have lived to see the full impact of his work, his legacy continues to shape our world in ways he could never have imagined. As we continue this journey through history, remember that the story of numbers is more than just digits and equations. It's a story of people, passions, and the relentless pursuit of progress. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover in this tale of mathematical marvels and economic upheaval. As we wrap up this numerical odyssey, we find ourselves in a world forever changed by Fibonacci's scribbles on parchment. Now, let's cut through the poetic mist and gaze upon the man and his legacy with the clarity of a freshly polished lens. Leonardo Fibonacci, despite what your local conspiracy theorist might claim, wasn't some mystical figure conjuring numbers out of thin air. He was, quite simply, a guy who really liked math and saw its potential to transform the mundane into the marvelous. First, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Fibonacci's fame is often attributed more to those mathematically prolific rabbits than to his actual contributions to mathematics. The Fibonacci sequence, while undoubtedly cool, because who doesn't geek out over patterns that pop up in everything from artichokes to galaxies, was just one small part of his opus. The real meat and potatoes of his legacy lie in his championing of the Hindu-Arabic numeral system. That's the true game-changer, the unsung hero that made accounting less of a headache and more of a breeze. But let's not sugarcoat it. In his lifetime, Fibonacci was not exactly the Leonardo DiCaprio of the Middle Ages. The medieval world was a bit preoccupied with plagues and wars to throw ticker-tape parades for a math nerd. Still, his work in Liber Abaci sent ripples through the academic and commercial communities, even if he didn't get to see the full tsunami of change in his own time. It's a classic case of the tortoise beating the hare, slow, steady, and ultimately triumphant. Now, onto the myths and misconceptions. Contrary to popular belief, Fibonacci wasn't some solitary genius scribbling away in a tower, isolated from the world. He was more of a mathematical sponge, soaking up knowledge from the diverse cultures he encountered on his travels. He wasn't inventing mathematics from scratch, but rather standing on the shoulders of giants, connecting dots that others had left scattered across the Mediterranean. He was a bridge, not an island, a conduit for mathematical ideas that flowed through the ancient world and into the Renaissance. And speaking of bridges, let's not forget the economic context. Fibonacci's ideas didn't just make accountants smile. They transformed the way commerce was conducted. In an era where a merchant's ledger could make or break fortunes, the efficiency of Arabic numerals was revolutionary. Imagine trying to calculate the profits from a shipment of silk using Roman numerals, like counting grains of sand on a beach. With Fibonacci's system, merchants could finally breathe easy, knowing their sums wouldn't leave them destitute. But what about Fibonacci the man? Here's where things get murky. There's a curious lack of personal anecdotes about him. He wasn't the type to keep a diary or pen love letters that would later be auctioned off for millions. Instead, he left us with mathematics, a language that transcends time, even if it doesn't offer much in the way of juicy gossip. His life remains largely a blank slate, a testament to the fact that not all historical figures come with a ready-made backstory fit for a Hollywood blockbuster. Yet, in this blankness lies a certain charm. Fibonacci's life, stripped of embellishments, invites us to focus on his work rather than the man himself. It's a refreshing change in a world obsessed with celebrity and personality. Fibonacci's legacy is all about substance over style, a reminder that sometimes the greatest impacts come from those who are more interested in ideas than fame. And what of his enduring influence? Today, Fibonacci's work is the backbone of countless fields. In finance, his sequence helps analysts predict stock trends, proving that even stock markets need a bit of rabbit-inspired logic now and then. In architecture and art, the sequence is a guide to aesthetic perfection, its proportions lending balance and harmony to everything from buildings to paintings. Even in computer science, Fibonacci's ideas underpin algorithms that power our digital age. But here's where the irony kicks in. While his sequence has reached almost mythical status, the real legacy of Fibonacci lies in the mundane. His promotion of the Hindu-Arabic numeral system is what truly reshaped the world. It's the unsung hero of his story, quiet force that turned the wheels of progress. Yet, in a twist befitting a Greek tragedy, it's the flashy allure of the Fibonacci sequence that captures most of the limelight. In the end, Fibonacci's legacy is a tapestry of contradictions. He was a man whose work was rooted in practicality, yet whose name is now synonymous with the mystical and the magical. He was a bridge between cultures, yet remains an enigma, his personal life as elusive as the secrets of the universe. His influence is felt in the grand sweep of history, yet his life was one of quiet dedication to the pursuit of knowledge. As we draw this tale to a close, let's raise a metaphorical glass to Leonardo Fibonacci, a true pioneer who found beauty in numbers and possibility in the mundane. His story is a reminder that the most profound changes often start with simple ideas, and that even the most humble of beginnings can lead to greatness. So next time you find yourself marveling at a sunflower or trying to make sense of your finances, remember the man who made it all possible, one digit at a time. And while Fibonacci himself may have faded into the annals of history, his legacy continues to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of numbers and the people who dare to see the world differently.